Yeah, we're off. Hi, guys.
Introducing Toshiba's Aoi air conditioner with an interchangeable fabric cover. Technology to keep your house comfortable through summer, including built-in Wi-Fi, energy monitoring, and quiet operation.
For February, he ended up going into the hospital, and it ended up. Welcome to the program today. My name is Mano Gonzalez, and I am here with a special guest, Bill Koenig. Welcome.
Hi, Mando. Great to be with you.
You know, before we get started here, I wanted to give everybody an update on Gary. You know, some of you don't see our Facebook or our other social media platforms, and Gary, as you might or might not know, he hasn't been feeling well for really about a year, I would say. And last month in February, he ended up going into the hospital, and it ended up being a very good thing. So we appreciate your prayers. The reason why it was good is because they found out that he needed a pacemaker, and so they
Hey, darling, good to see you.
As well as a couple stents. So he is home now, and he is doing well. He's on the road to recovery. So we certainly would appreciate your prayers for him as he recovers, as well as when he feels well and strong enough, he will be back here with us in studio. I look forward to doing more programs with him. So appreciate your prayers on that. But I do want to help introduce Bill. Some of you know him for sure, but for those of you who might not, Bill, kind of talk to our audience a little bit about you, your journey, where people can learn more about you, just kind of the whole gamut.
Well, 26 years ago in Dallas, we started an internet news service that focuses on Israel and the Middle East and world news from a biblical perspective. 2000, actually, right after President Bush was elected in 2001, the Lord really put it on our heart to move to D.C., move our organization from Dallas to D.C. And just outside of Nashville, before I could even think of that, first of all, the Lord put in my heart, why are you going to Washington? Before I could even think of an answer, it was stand by Israel. And that directive was given to me. I'll never forget it. And that's what we've done for 26 years. Obviously, Israel, the city of Jerusalem, is God's time clock. And we've spoken in churches and congregations in 32 states and 10 countries about the biblical significance of the time that we're living in. We post news every day at our website, watch.org, and I also write a weekly news report, Koenig's Eye View, that comes out every Friday, and it's 20 pages in length, and it's a summary of news that happened that week that was biblically relevant. And as you all know, all being watchmen, it's getting tough to stay up with everything, but it's an exciting time to be alive. It's an exciting time to be doing what you all.
Okay, this is March 2022.
Doing Mondo and myself as watchmen, and we continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hey,
and,
goodbye,
the
good to
Lord's
see
return, and it seems to be getting closer every day.
You know, I don't want to underestimate as well Bill's influence. He has been with all the movers and shakers through the last 26 years in Washington, D.C. I mean, you have been there, press, you know, you name it, with all the presidents had to go through the Obama years in some sense because of really the hostility to Christianity, which kind of give us an update now, because we're seeing so much of that hostility and overt lawlessness and immorality returning again in the administration. You know, not that America's perfect under any president, but no doubt an administration has influence, right?
No doubt about it. The 8 years of being there during George W. Bush's 2 terms, it was a blessing. You know, as a conservative Christian from Dallas, it was great. You know, Bush just had a very significant role, biblical role, which we'll go into a little bit later. But nonetheless, you know, every day the press was after him because of Iraq, because of Afghanistan. But any conservative presidents, whether it's Ronald Reagan, George Bush, or Trump, they are merciful. They will attack and make it very hard for conservative presidents. The 8 years of Obama, I wrote a book, Revealed Obama's Legacy. We'll never get over those 8 years. There's different parts of, you know, the mainstream media didn't hold his administration accountable for a lot of things. And that's what's difficult when you see that. And what we have then Trump, you look back at the things that Trump did. I continue to say that Trump did more for Israel than all our presidents combined. He moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He said Israel has the rights to the Golan Heights. He got out of the Iran nuclear deal. His Secretary of State Pompeo said Israel has the rights to build in Judea and Samaria. They're not illegal, according to the San Remo Agreement of 1920 through 22. And he was an extraordinary president. Unfortunately, he came up with a peace plan in January 28, 2020, and that changed things dramatically. It kind of fits the parallel of my Eye to Eye book, Facing the Consequences of Dividing Israel. And I wrote a commentary, what was life in America like before January 28, 2020, and what has it been like since January 28? It's just two different worlds. President Trump had a lot of God's favor, but unfortunately, because of his son-in-law Kushner, he went along with this deal of the century peace plan, the Peace to Prosperity plan that he introduced in January 28, 2020, and also the Abraham Accords of September 15, 2020. So that disrupted things for President Trump. And now we have Joe Biden, which is Obama 2.0. His first 30 days of executive orders that he put in place, a lot of them got rid of executive orders of President Trump. And it showed what mattered to him. So we've seen a lot, but and I like to mention this, Mondo, our presidents, despite their mistakes and errors, they have had a divine biblical position. They have had a divine role in bringing things to completion. America might not be obvious in Scripture. Some people say they are, some people not. But for the most part, I don't see the U.S. in prophecy. But no country in the world has done more through our presidents to accelerate us to these final day events that we're watching right now.
Wow,
Throughout
spot
the
on
Middle
there.
East with Russia, Turkey, Iran, former Soviet Union countries in the Caucasus, Libya, Sudan, Ethiopia, as well as Israel's relationship with Sunni countries that couldn't look to Obama or Biden for help. So they've developed a closer relationship with Israel. So the bottom line, Mondo, we're living in the most important time in biblical history. And again, the time clock is Israel and Jerusalem. The entire international community wants to divide the city of Jerusalem. And we know that in Zechariah 12:3, it will become a burdensome stone. And those that attempt to move it or do something with it will be injured. And what a blessing to be living in a time such as this.
Yeah,
Amen.
I mean, as we sit and watch, especially some of you who might be older, you see the history and the tradition of our country being used by God to bring the gospel around the world. And for the most part, we've had, we're Judeo-Christian in our perspective, and that has produced a lot of blessing. And it's when you look at the history in the Scripture about the nation Israel, especially the Book of Judges, they're going back and forth, and you see these cycles all through the prophets. You look at Isaiah, even to Jeremiah, Ezekiel. I mean, all the prophets would speak about Israel. They would go through these cycles of prosperity, and then they would leave God, and then they'd be in trouble, and then God would rescue them, and then they'd be oppressed, and then the whole cycle would start over. And for ours, we've had pretty much a couple of 100 years of prosperity, but now the morality, the immorality, the decline, and I think about the average Jewish person, maybe a prophet, whatever, but the average Jewish guy that's sitting there, that's faithful to God. He's watching the prophets speak to the leadership of Israel, and he has to sit there and watch his country decline because they refuse to repent. And then ultimately, many times, whether it was Assyria in the north taking Israel out, Israel in the northern kingdom.
Yeah.
When you look at, again, just the testimony of Scripture going back to really
Hi, Han, good to see
God
ya.
has put Israel at the center. I mean, the passage, Genesis 12:3, if you bless Israel, you'll be blessed. If you bless, Abraham and his descendants, you'll be cursed. If you curse them, you'll be cursed. So we see that outworking of, again, surprisingly, Trump had done so much for Israel, the embassy, and just for Christians. And again, that doesn't just throw him out the window. But in this particular instance, he went to divide the land. We see in the book of Amos,
I forgot the
divide
cats.
the land. And so as we see after he, the election, we won't just go into that, but Now under this new administration, as you said, we have Obama 2.0. And one of the things that, let's shift to a little bit more of geopolitics. We see the absolute detriment of how we left Afghanistan. That made us look extremely weak. And to the two other.
Yeah, Gabe put him up this morning, Hen. She's got the tree up as well. I'll wait till Tracy gets here and I'll show you guys the tree.
Powers that are out there, it's in China and Russia. So here we are, in the midst of Ukraine. If you're watching this, Ukraine has already been invaded.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about Ukraine as well as the new world order idea. I mean, let's talk about that.
Well, when you look at what the world was like during Trump's 4 years, every time the Arabs and Middle East countries, the OPEC countries, would start to raise their price of crude oil, he said, okay, fine, you can defend yourself. He came out boldly. And I remember as it was yesterday, 65, 70 bucks a barrel, and say, hey, wait a second. If you're going to do this and affect our economy this way, then you're going to have to defend yourself. And they immediately stopped.
It was down to 35 bucks or lower.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was incredible, especially 35 coming out of the coronavirus crisis when it just absolutely plummeted. But then when that was pre-COVID, when it was around 65, 70, and he told Prince Salman there in Saudi Arabia and some of the other OPEC countries, okay, fine. You want to defend yourself? Have at it. But it worked. It worked. And then, I'll never forget, he's sitting there at Mar-a-Lago having dinner with the premier of China Xi. And between dinner and dessert, he sends in 56 cruise missiles into Syria. I mean, wow. It wasn't like a day later or a week later. It was between dinner and dessert.
Yeah.
Wow. That he
it showed his strength.
Oh, absolutely, Mondo, and also the gift of his unpredictability. Yeah. It really worked his strength. And Joe Biden's back in office right now, and he and Obama were the ones that favored bringing all our troops out of Iraq. Well, that birthed ISIS, which became a huge problem. And then and you look at what he's done in Afghanistan, that's a debacle. It's so stupid, you'd have to think it's on purpose.
Yep.
And we're still analyzing and interpreting that decision, but that's a debacle. You have all these people that need to be brought out of the country, and he takes our troops out. I mean, it's beyond comprehension.
Well, I'm sure you heard and maybe you did too, the generals. I watched a report after this had happened, and they have the generals there, and they're giving a press report. And they said, this would happen perfectly according to plan. And I'm like, are you in the same universe as me? Unless, like you mentioned, maybe it was perfectly according to plan. I mean, there's no other option. They're not that dumb, are they?
No. And there were some generals that said, no, we told Biden at least leave 2,500, the 2,500 troops we had in there to bring people to safety. And Trump and Pompeo worked a deal out with the Taliban and with the help of Qatar, the country Qatar. But there was contingencies. Of course, the mainstream media tried to blame Trump for this effort at trying to negotiate a deal with the Taliban, and that's not true. I can guarantee that departure would have been tremendously different, and it may never have happened because the contingencies Trump and Pompeo put in place would have probably led to that never happening. But what a sign to our allies in the Middle East.
We'll betray you.
And the same thing when you got North Korea, you've got China and Russia looking at this, unfortunately, amateur show at the White House with Biden, Harris, Sullivan, Blinken, and then the guys there at the Pentagon. I mean, unfortunately, this is not our best. And unfortunately, it's sending the wrong message to our enemies. And, you can look what's happening in Ukraine right now. And some of the statements of Biden said, Russia's going to attack them for sure. Well, why don't you help them and send them, put other equipment in there before this happens?
Well, especially when you think about this isn't, again, I'm nobody, who am I, in the sense of watching it, but I'm not a military strategist, but yet everybody knew, and Putin was not hiding that he was surrounding all of them with couple 100,000 troops or whatever. And so right then, why were we not sending in military or hardware now that the supply chains are broken? it can't happen now.
Absolutely. General Kellogg said it well. He said Russia has their best troops on the borders. They have their best equipment. They have their special forces. So it looks, we need to, and General Keane as well as General Boykin said, they're going to attack. It was obvious. I mean, why do you expend this effort and then bump your troop level to 175,000? I mean, you know what's going to happen. And I think, just the fact, once again, it shows this lack of professionalism. And unfortunately, this is probably the weakest, if not weakest, administration we've had in our country in place at the most critical time.
Yep, you got to agree to that.
And
Biden's a
the pressure
nightmare.
being put on Putin right now, it's increasing. They're shutting down, unfortunately, the Russian people. It's not their war, but they're the ones that are getting hurt with the ruble crash. The oligarchs are still making their money off that Russian oil that continues to be purchased. But it's a very unfortunate time, and it could happen, Mondo, where they're going to corner Putin at some point. And how will he respond? Our concern here in the U.S. is obviously cyber attack on our power grid, our military infrastructure, and the other thing is he's threatened to you. He's got he's heightened the alert of their nuclear missile, not the highest level yet, but that's obviously a concern too. And if Putin thinks he is losing and possibly lose his life, he might do some things that are drastic. That's a concern.
Let's talk, kind of established, the chaos that's going on really in the world right now. In the sense of prophetically, how does this shape the prophetic scene for us? I mean, I'm not saying that Jesus is coming next week. He could certainly, the rapture, he could come anytime. But in the sense of where we're going with the New World Order, the globalism, how does this latest war in Ukraine and the players, right? I mean, if you remember this, China, the report is China, Xi told them, hey, make sure to do this after the Olympics because we want to keep that. And so sure enough, he waited. Putin went in after. So prophetically speaking, kind of give us your thoughts on that.
Well, you got the players aligning. What's interesting is Turkey is part of NATO. And there's a fair amount of Turkey. I heard of this today, that there's a fair amount of people from Turkey that are inside Ukraine, and Erdogan is not pleased with what's happening. And there's a possibility of having a lot of his people stranded there. They're part of NATO. They're, Russia, Turkey, Iran, Sudan, Libya, which is very close to Russia, and the former Soviet Union countries in the Caucasian Mountains. I mean, this is the assemblage of the Ezekiel 37 and 38. And most people have always thought Russia is Magog, and then the leader of Russia would be Gog. So some people, it's interesting. More and more people are considering the possibility that Gog might even be the Turkish leader and Magog Turkey. That's being reviewed, debated, and studied right now. So the question is, how long will Putin survive all of this? And throughout the years, I think I'll put it this way. There is no doubt that the United States and Russia are the facilitators of the final days. There is no doubt of their significant role in bringing things to completion. And 37, you look at Ezekiel 37, 38, and many of the prophecy people over the years have believed that Russia is the main player. Well, we certainly are watching Putin behave differently, Mondo, than we expected. Condoleezza Rice, Macron from France said this is not the man that they've known, that they've met, that they've worked with in the past. His behavior, some people say it's possessed, and other people are saying he's as shrewd and crafty as
he's calm in his speeches.
Yeah, he's calm in his speeches. So yeah, that says a lot. Mm-hmm. So, but again, very significant role. It's he'd like to see NATO bust and break. It's not happening right now. Europe is Ukraine now, and now Moldova, and then Finland and Sweden are like to be part of the EU. So it's there's a lot of shuffling going on right now. but nonetheless, very, very significant biblically.
When you look at the, again, just go back a couple of years ago, and what we're going to see more and more of this as it relates to energy independence. And we were energy independent. We were under Trump's deregulation and other things. And yet it's, again, who am I? Nobody. But yet you think, okay, if we've seen this in the past, this isn't anything new, that Putin would shut off or threaten to shut off gas to Europe, to Germany, all these guys. Why in advance were we not helping to do this? I mean, recently the recent administration shut down some pipeline stuff. And so it's amazing to watch the incompetence of what is happening. But, we're going to take a little break here, but I want to get back to this because one of the things, if you, again, are a follower of our ministry, we write about these things on a monthly basis in our magazine. And so we want to take a little break here. Bill has written for our magazine prior and hopefully will again. And so we'll take a little break here. You can see how you can stay up to date with our monthly magazine.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm Bob Ulrich, Gary Stearman's partner and the co-founder of Prophecy Watchers. I would love to tell you how you can become a subscriber to our wonderful prophecy magazine, creatively named The Prophecy Watcher. And ready for this? How you can get 8 powerful prophecy DVDs as a free bonus for subscribing today. Every day, the ancient prophecies of the Bible get more and more exciting as we watch world events come into perfect alignment with the words of the ancient prophets. Examine the pre-trib rapture doctrine taught by the Apostle Paul. Come to a deeper understanding of the giants of Genesis 6 and the real reason for the flood of Noah. Read the shocking things we see coming out of the world of science and technology, mind-blowing advances in transhumanism and artificial intelligence. Keep a close eye for a series of wars coming very soon to the Middle East. The Bible's a supernatural book, and we enjoy covering the fringe subjects and dark corners of Scripture as well. UFOs, the Nephilim, the miracles of the Bible, and so much more. It's a one-of-a-kind publication full of articles that will make you a Bible prophecy expert and prepare you for the future. We have a very special subscription offer for you today. For your gift of $50 or more, by our desire to tell the world that Jesus is the only answer for these troubling times. And we do believe that he's coming back very soon, just as he promised. Partner with us today. Help us take God's message of salvation through Jesus Christ to the whole world.
Well, Bill, before the break, we were just talking about the energy independence that we had and how this has been Ukraine, the pipelines going across there, Europe completely held hostage by Russia. And I see this as contributing as well to maybe in the future with the hooks in the jaws of Israel they've already been solicited to try to provide natural gas through their field, the Tamar field, the Leviathan field. So you can see that shaping up. But before let's move on from that, because my question just recently, Forbes magazine, when we think about globalism, they've come out, we have a few minutes left. They came out with this, regardless how you feel about the vaccine, and we're talking about the ramifications of the vaccine, and they came out with the vaccine passport. Kind of talk about that.
It's a smart health card, and we've got 30 states now that are aligning with this plan. And the plan is to have a smart health card that documents, when you've been vaccinated. And of course, they're doing this, they say, to protect yourself against those that might not have been vaccinated. And there are some red states, conservative states, that are part of this plan. And it's, it'll be tied
It's
into
still
a
glary.
QR code.
Hang on, guys.
So this is, we heard a lot about vaccine passports. So in Europe, and this is going to be an effort. There's 100 healthcare systems right now in hospitals that have signed on to this smart card. And
quietly, right? I mean, this.
Oh,
I thought this was dead, but quietly it's not died.
Absolutely, this is been going on for a while. I've been following this for about a year and a half. You got Microsoft, Salesforce, Oracle, and the Mayo Clinic that are involved in developing this smart health card. So you got 100 major health services and hospitals across the country that are part of it. And then they're going to have Walmart and all the drugstores, CVS, Walgreens, all part of this. And when you've been vaccinated, You'll have a smart health card that you can show that you've been vaccinated, and it's going to lead to other things, as we know, Mondo. So this is, like you said, it's just so quietly and subtly done. And it's a company called Bindle that's been the one that's been handling this with the states, and so quietly, so subtly, and conservative states are also becoming part of it.
Yeah. Now you would think that, hey, you know, the restrictions are relatively gone in most states, even some of the most liberal states or blue states, cities, New York, Los Angeles, and
Yeah, and I usually find a position where it doesn't glare, so it only sort of hassles us for a couple of minutes, and then I'll work it out.
One down, which is awesome. So no need, right? You know, why come up with a solution when there's no problem?
Well, what's interesting is this is for future purposes. It's these gradual steps that are ominous and dangerous over time. They said in the article, in the Forbes article, that 200 million people have been jabbed. And fortunately, right now, and this was according to Dr. Robert Malone, I saw him and Laura Ingham right before Christmas, that the Omicron is an early Christmas gift because this is going to lead to herd immunity. And look at how fast things have changed. Look at the sports arenas. Look at the football stadiums during the playoffs and the Super Bowl and all the bowl games. They were packed out, and we had no breakouts. So Malone and Hatfield were right. And you know, a lot of people a lot of people didn't get the jab. They have natural antibodies. I was talking to two different well-known doctors recently about Acharya at a meeting, and then I've heard Dr. McCullough from Dallas say that these antibodies are lifetime. They're lifetime antibodies. And when I was talking about Acharya, there was another person there that said that she even understood that people that got the Spanish flu in 1918, the few that are living, still have the antibodies. So I'm hopeful that the antibodies from the people that got it will be sufficient. You know, obviously there's concern about a future variant or a future mutation coming through, but for right now, life is getting back to somewhat normal pretty fast, except some of these other things we've talked about.
Well, Bill, we're out of time for today. Hope you stick around. We'll do another one. And as Bill mentioned, as we see, I mean, this is Forbes magazine talking about this passport system that has been quietly underway. And again, there are naturally some conveniences for this, but it's when we think about the future mark of the beast and the
and it's on the highest angle it can be on. So you're right.
Requirement to have a certain mark so you can't buy or sell. I mean, these are the systems that are going to be in place that are going to help set the stage for when that finally does happen. It'll be a nice transition in. But anyways, this is all kind of we got for today, but we're done.
Prophecy in numerous parts.
Like Knights, bickering band members. Can Greg help Loaded Diver become the legends they think they are? Or too much time with Roderick?
It's the apocalypse, end of days, the judgment day, the end of the world, my friend. The Mayans knew about it, the Hopis, the I Ching, the Bible.
What would you say if I told you that everything happening in the world today was predicted in a book that was written over 2,000 years ago? The information I'm about to lay out for you has been discussed for thousands of years. However, our generation is the only generation in the history of the world who is lucky enough to see these things come to pass, and it's happening right before our very eyes. Now, at this point, some of you may be saying to yourselves, but the Bible was written by men, and Jesus Christ is just a myth. So why should we believe in some fairy tale from a time long ago? Fairy tale? Myth? Actually, this couldn't be further from the truth. The truth of the matter is that Jesus Christ was an actual historical figure whose life was well documented in non-biblical historical records. He was even documented performing miracles. His crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension are all matters of historical record. Real historians and scholars from all over the world agree on these things, and anyone who investigates these matters for themselves will reach the same conclusions. And I'm not talking about just Googling something or reading articles written by people who have an agenda. I'm talking about source material, original documents, and historical records. These things have no agenda and are not open to interpretation. They simply tell it as it is. Now, we could go on for hours talking about this, but I'll just leave you with this clip from Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ.
I remember going alone in my room, and I took a yellow legal pad and put a line down the middle. And on one side, I started to list all of the evidence I'd encountered for Jesus Christ being the Son of God. And on the other side, all the negative evidence against that. And I wrote page after page. And finally, I put my pen down. I said, wait a minute. In light of this avalanche of evidence pointing toward the truth of Christianity, it would require more faith for me to maintain my atheism than to become a follower of Jesus Christ.
Oh, it's Sam, not me.
So now that we've established that Jesus Christ is a real person, let's take a look at some of his words and the prophecies he made and see if they hold up in modern times. So one day, some of Jesus' followers came to him and asked, "What shall be the signs of thy coming and of the end of the world?" Jesus gave them a list of things to look out for. And then in Matthew 24:7, he says this, "For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows." The beginning of sorrows, meaning when you see these things take place, there is no turning back. These events are going to set off a chain
And we know damn well that's exactly where we are now.
reaction, resulting in the
Even
end
at the
of
time
the
of
world as
sorrows.
we know it, or as it's called biblically, the day of the Lord. All the things he said are coming to pass right before our very eyes. Let's break it down. Nation against nation. The word used in the original manuscripts for nation is ethnos, meaning a race, that is, a tribe. So ethnos versus ethnos, or race versus race. Sound familiar? What about kingdom versus kingdom? Well, we see this playing out live on TV every single day, and it has been for well over 100 years.
The first time China has expelled and actively denounced the U.S. for what it calls the illegal trespass of a warship off the Shisha Islands.
India and China will be holding their 7th military talks on Monday. The meet is expected to not only take stock of the situation on ground, but also the measures on de-escalation by the Chinese side.
Heavy fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan has continued for another day.
And as more explosions rock the area surrounding Ukraine's largest nuclear power plant, officials are urging
the kingdom of the West versus the kingdom of the East. And it's not just about war, it's about ideologies, domination, and control. Kingdom versus kingdom.
Yeah.
There shall be famines. According to the United Nations, the world is on the brink of a biblical famine caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. 135 million people in 55 countries experienced acute food insecurity in 2019. 135 million people. And that was last year, before COVID-19. Let's put that into perspective. 135 million people. That's almost half of the entire population of the world when Jesus was alive. There will be famines. Pestilence. The word pestilence means a plague, literally the disease. Can you think of anything that matches the description of the disease? Not only that, but people are the sickest they've ever been, historically speaking. We have modern medicine and drugs that don't heal people. Rather, they keep people sick and just manage their symptoms. That's why it's not called the healthcare industry. It's called the sick care industry. According to the World Health Organization, 29 million people die each year from preventable diseases that could be cured with proper diet and exercise. Pestilence. Earthquakes in diverse places.
Despite what you may have heard in the past, this is the compiled data from the USGS from over the last 100 years. Keep in mind that we're not talking about the millions of microtremors that can now be detected from the distribution of more numerous and sensitive sensors, but strictly data from the larger earthquakes that can be felt by people beginning at 6.3 and up on the Richter scale, that could be easily detected by early 19th century sensors from virtually anywhere in the world. This data shows what the USGS and other organizations do not want you to see.
It shows that the earthquakes are increasing in intensity and they are increasing in frequency. This is exactly the description that was prophesied.
Now, these aren't the only things that Jesus told us would happen before the day of the Lord occurs. He also said, Matthew 24:9, "Then they shall deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake." We see this exact scenario playing out right now all over the world. Places like China and North Korea have underground churches where the members risk death if caught. We see groups like ISIS lining Christians up and decapitating them on camera, and then uploading the footage online for the whole world to see. Not only that, he said, "Ye shall be hated for my name's sake." And that's exactly what's happening in society as a whole. People are embracing this newfound hatred for Christians and for Jesus Christ. Christians are now being looked down upon and treated like some kind of disease that needs to be cleansed from the earth. "Ye shall be hated for my name's sake." Matthew 24:10, "And then many shall be offended, and many shall betray one another, and shall hate one another." Many shall be offended.
Black Lives
Sound
Matter,
familiar?
Me
It's
Too
no
movement.
secret that society has become ultra sensitive, and now people get offended by every little thing. You can't even speak about ideas anymore without someone taking it the wrong way and hating you for it. People call it political correctness or cancel culture, and the Bible told us this would happen. Many shall be offended. Check. And then Jesus said in Matthew 24:11, "And many false prophets shall rise and deceive many." False prophets deceiving many. Again, this should sound very familiar to a lot of you. We have people like Joel Osteen, Kenneth Copeland, and basically the entire NAR movement who are leading people in the wrong direction by preaching a false gospel to their millions of followers. There are hundreds of examples of this. The false gospel is being preached, and concepts like repentance and hell are being excluded from the Bible because people are too scared to talk about them. False prophets. Check. Matthew 24:12, "And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold." Iniquity, otherwise known as wickedness or sinfulness. It's running rampant in our world. Just turn on the TV and wait 5 seconds. You'll see.
Move! The subject's closed.
Yeah! It's a robot that is designed to molest children.
Another thing Jesus said in Matthew 24:14, "And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come." This is a curious one. The gospel of Jesus Christ shall be preached to the whole world, and then the end will come. This news story from late 2018 really hits the nail on the head for this one. This missionary was killed by an uncontacted tribe on a remote island off the coast of India in late 2018. And this island is thought to be the last place on earth, literally, where Christian missionaries had never been. He was killed preaching the gospel to literally the last place on earth where the gospel had never been preached.
Wow.
Now think about this. What happened since then? Basically everything. Since that time, late 2018, the world has gotten exponentially worse. And it's actually quite astonishing how fast things have declined since then.
Wow, that's an interesting link. Very impressed.
The gospel shall be preached to the entire world. Check. All these things Jesus warned about have come to pass, or are coming to pass right now. But what about the rest of the Bible? What other prophecies have been fulfilled regarding end times events? Well, the list can go on for miles, so we're just going to cover a few of them here. The book of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 4. "But thou,
Yeah,
O
me
Daniel,
too, man.
shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." Many shall run to and fro. According to the FAA, over 1 million people fly every single day. On top of that, there's an estimated 1.4 billion cars on the road globally, with more being added every single day. There can be no mistaking it. Our generation has more people going to and fro than any other point in history. Many shall run to and fro. Check. And knowledge shall be increased. This one is no mystery. With the advent of internet, smartphones, and technology, more people have access to the collective knowledge of all of humanity combined than ever before. Approximately 4.57 billion people in the world have access to the internet. Compare that with the 300 million that were alive during Jesus' time, and there can be no mistaking it. Knowledge has increased to levels that would be considered impossible by the people living in biblical times. Knowledge shall be increased. Check. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. So this prophecy has two parts. In the latter times, people will, 1, depart from the faith, and 2, give heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Now, it's no secret that large numbers of people are abandoning Christian beliefs and exchanging them for New Age ideas like reincarnation, karma, and the law of attraction. Here are a few charts from the Pew Research Center that illustrates the decline of Christianity in America. So this is between 2018 and 2019. And as you can see here, it breaks it down into the 4 generations and how many are Christian. The silent generation, born 1928 through 1945, 84% are Christian. Baby boomers, 1946 through 1964, 76% are Christian. Generation X, 1965 through 1980, 67%. And then now we get to millennials, 1981 and 1996, 49%. That's 35% decline. Only 49% identify with Christian beliefs. Now, if you look at the other side of the chart, 40% of millennials are unaffiliated, meaning they're atheist or agnostic or something like that. However, we know that these numbers are probably not too accurate. And people who identify with being Christian doesn't mean they're Christian. There's a large difference between somebody who maybe was born in a Christian household and identifies culturally as a Christian and somebody who is a born-again Christian. There's a huge difference there. So this chart doesn't tell us who's a born-again Christian and who's not, because we all need to become born-again Christians. Nobody's born a Christian. It's a decision you have to make for yourself. Now that we've established the fact that people have departed from the faith in large numbers, let's take a look at the second part of this prophecy. People will give heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. So what exactly are seducing spirits and doctrines of devils? Well, spiritualism, New Age belief, witchcraft, and shamanism all fall into these categories, but that's not all. We can take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10, and get a little bit more detail on this subject. Quote, there shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all these things are an abomination unto the Lord. It's as clear as day. New Age beliefs are an abomination to the Lord. You see, all of these spiritual ideas do not come from God. They come directly from Lucifer himself. Remember what he told Eve in the Garden of Eden? Ye shall be as gods. Sound familiar? Because that's exactly the same philosophy that New Age teaches. New Age beliefs say that we are all God, the universe is alive, and we are part of it. We create our own destiny. We are masters of our own universe. And if we want something bad enough, just will it into existence because you are God. Now, we know that's false, and we know there is only one God. And that's exactly why it's an abomination unto the Lord to practice these things, because we're trying to put control into our own hands when there's only one in control, and that's the Lord. The bottom line is that New Ageism comes directly from Lucifer. Ye shall be as gods. It's the oldest lie in the book. Now, let's take a look at another chart from the Pew Research Center and see what it says about how many people believe in New Age beliefs. Now, take a look at this chart and you're going to see something shocking. It says right here, plain as day, 37% of Christians believe that spiritual energy can be located in physical things. Also, 40% of Christians believe in psychics. What does that tell you? It tells you that people don't read their Bibles because we know that it is an abomination unto the Lord to believe and practice such things. 29% of Christians believe in reincarnation, and 26% of Christians believe in astrology. These are all doctrines of demons, and they are giving heed to seducing spirits. And it's not just Christians that believe in these things. If you look at this chart, it says right here, 78% of people believe in at least one New Age belief. 78%. There can be no question about it. People have departed from the faith and have given heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, making this prophecy fulfilled. Now let's take a look in Romans chapter 1, verse 22 through 32.
And they seduce so many, don't they, Hans?
See if this rings any bells for you. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible men, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanliness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this cause God gave them up to vile affections, for even their women changed their natural use into that which is against nature, and likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust toward one another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was meet. And even as they did not like to retain God and their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind, to do these things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable and unmerciful, who knowing the judgment of God, that they would commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. Now, there is only one generation in the entire history of the world that matches this description. There can be no mistaking it. Just look back through history and try and find one generation that fits the bill. You won't be able to. The truth of the matter is that our generation is the only one in history to fulfill all of these things. There is no question about that. We could go on all day, as there are many more Bible prophecies that describes the times we are living in, but I think you get the idea.
Prophecy in numerous parts of the Bible refer to a coming day when portals will be open and spiritual entities are going to pass through and come to the earth. There is something more supernatural on the drawing board at CERN than what is being admitted. Even Adam Barker of Tech Bubble wrote of CERN a while back that with the LHC, CERN are expecting to find other dimensions and open portals to these dimensions. If you have the image of Stargate in your head right now, you're spot on. That's what I said.
Some people say it's the sea, while others say it's the unusually rich milk. But if you are...
And then he went on to draw parallels to the biblical story of Jacob's ladder. Perhaps you remember the dream that says, "Behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it." Then Jacob wakes up from his sleep and he says, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." And he was afraid. And he says, "How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." Genesis 28. Now, this ladder described in the first book of Bible describes something like a portal from heaven to earth through which God's angels, interdimensional and spiritual beings from another reality, were traveling. When Jacob wakes up, he refers to the location as a gate, much like today's trendy terms gateway or Stargate. One of CERN's goals is to recreate Jacob's ladder, according to Mark, and to reopen a portal. Now, Sergio Bertolucci, who is the official director for research and scientific computing at CERN, he was asked a while back about this extra-dimensional doorway by the Register, which is a London and New York operated science and technology journal. And he didn't hesitate with an enlightening response. He said, "Yes, out of this door might come something, or we might send something through it." Now, if that's true, and if those are accepted for their literal meaning and not written off as some kind of poetic allegory, as some scholars have claimed, then the idea of CERN playing with gateways is a major concern.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
And if, as
Wow.
CERN claims, they're only out to explore space, time, matter, particles, and the origin of our known universe and planets from exclusively a scientific or Darwinian related perspective, if their agenda is unrelated to Bible prophecy entirely, then what is it with all this mystical symbolism that they knowingly are associating themselves with? Wouldn't it be more appropriate for them just to proudly display a polished statue of a particle or some artist depiction of the Big Bang instead of the statue of Shiva? For those who have not yet heard about this controversial piece of art that CERN proudly exhibits between buildings 39 and 40 near the main building of their operation, it stands as really the most visible and celebrated imagery behind their work, Shiva. This is the Hindu god of destruction. In 2004, the government of India, which has had a long-standing friendship with leaders behind the CERN project even before the completion of the Large Hadron Collider, they gifted CERN with this bronze work of an art depicting Shiva as Nataraja, the lord or sometimes king of the dance. This dance that Shiva performs in the sculpture is the one that provides the source of the creation cycle in Hindu mythology, the preservation of all life in existence and the termination of all life in existence. The Rudra Tandava is a dance that especially displays Shiva's sadistic personality as he rains down the ultimate destruction upon a weary planet. The plaque at the side beside the statue, however, reads in part, hundreds of years ago, Indian artists created visual images of dancing Shivas in a beautiful series of bronzes. In our time, physicists have used the most advanced technology to portray the patterns of the cosmic dance. The metaphor of the cosmic dance thus unifies ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics. So right there out in the open for all to see is a direct correlation between the Hindu perception of Shiva hundreds of years ago, which is the concept of destroyer that I explained a moment ago, and our time, unifying, quote, ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics.
Something is going on.
I think everything's a conspiracy.
Everything is.
Now you can refill and reuse your Morning Fresh bottle to help cut plastic waste and make a difference.
This is how I used to get paid. I'm still going to help. Your invoice is now $358. But since I got MYOB, my invoice is now.
Additionally, and perhaps even more important, there's a significant section of CERN that is built upon the St. Genus Poëli, which is a commune in Ain, a department of France. In Roman times, the St. Genus Poëli was called Apolliacum, but the town and a temple were dedicated there in ancient times to Apollyon, the destroyer, the Shiva Horus, if you will. Apollyon is also the angel of the bottomless pit, referred to in Revelation 9:11. And then there is a connection between CERN and the Gothard Base Tunnel, the GBT, which is the world's deepest and longest tunnel system, consisting of two parallel passages, each moving in a single direction on a single track. The GBT passes directly beneath St. Gothard's Pass, a strategic north-south corridor that connects northern and southern Switzerland. The connection to the Large Hadron Collider has to be made primarily because of the bizarre opening ceremony that was live streamed to the entire world on June 1, 2016, that included this highly occult, demonic dance with characterization, beginning with a call to unite the religions of the world by conducting an interfaith blessing of the tunnel beside a statue of St. Barbara, the patron saint of miners. Following the blessing at the statue of St. Barbara, the press, along with visiting dignitaries, also paid tribute to the 9 miners who had lost their lives during construction of the tunnel. Bodillo's southern portal provided the visiting dignitaries a disturbing parade, really, of miners, erotic dancers, zombies, fallen angels, all of whom were obeying the call of what they called the shepherd, whose yodels invoked the appearance of the event's infernal master of ceremonies, a goat man, portrayed by a young and energetic dancing male. This creature is shown with a Baphomet headdress, a goat demon's head, if you will, and a goat body costume with a hairy pelt. And then it had a formal tuxedo over the top. The imagery was heavily evocative of the German and Bavarian Christmas demon known as Krampus. Now, according to tradition, Krampus accompanies St. Nicholas on his midwinter rounds with the intent to steal boys and girls, putting them into a basket carried on his back, or he may decide to beat them with branches for being naughty. Maurice Bruce published a book on pre-Christian Alpine traditions in 1958, and he had this to say about the half-goat, half-demon entity. There seems to be little doubt as to the true identity, for in no other form is the full regalia of the horned god of the witches so well preserved. The birch, apart from its phallic significance, may have a connection with the initiation rites of certain witch covens, rites which entailed binding and scourging as a form of mock death. The chains could have been introduced in a Christian attempt to bind the devil, but again, they could be a remnant of pagan initiation rites. Many show the goat man in formal dress and a tuxedo-style cutaway formal coat and trousers, but with his usual horned goat face and always with his tongue extended. Now, this tongue out pose seems to be popular with ancient gods, whether they're Mayan, Hindu, Babylonian, Egyptian, Greek, or even British. For some reason, the coat of arms from the Prince of Wales supports both a lion and a unicorn with their tongues extended, for instance. More than likely, this tongue position represents sex magic, fornicating with fallen angels. The ancient symbol of the horned god, referenced by Maureen Bruce in the quote that I made a moment ago, it allows us to connect our goat demon from the opening ceremony at the GBT to CERN. Despite the fact that the Large Hadron Collider sits 3 to 4 hours down the twisty road from the location, the horned god's circular logic and passion for human depravity, Cernunnos, as is sometimes called, or Cernunnos, or the Green Man of British lore, simply had to make an appearance at this occult ceremony. Josh Peck and I and many other researchers have written extensively regarding the in-game plans for tunneling beneath the earth and smashing atoms to smithereens as nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to open portals. But the opening ceremony at Gothard made it clear that these portals are intended to do something else, and that is to release demonic entities. The twin tunnels of the Gothard base tunnel commence with twin portals on a single track. These northward and southward journeys symbolize the death, birth, death cycle of the Green Man, who dies in the fall and winter and rises in the spring, summer. The tunnel ceremony was all about sex rites and rebirth, leading to a new world order that's a complete reversal of the Judeo-Christian design. This included the triple goddess and the horned god, along with human sacrifice and a return to pagan worship, all of which lie at the center of this nauseating ritual play, which you can probably still watch on YouTube. Dancers dressed as miners climbed this rock face, and they dug into the earth, so to speak, to unveil what was beneath the earth, a great machine formed from human arms that rotated and churned into various shapes and design, many of which resembled the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. Once this opening was achieved, the miners stripped off their orange jumpsuit attire and took up arms. That is, they used staves to perform a dance routine that looked like warfare. It was this forensic dance that aroused a giant. So,
I'm Jake Foley. I'm a gambler.
So clearly, the endeavor connected to CERN is far more than Switzerland's braggadocio about an engineering feat. The connection between CERN and ritualistic summoning of a sleeping giant, the horned god of Cernunnos, or even Melkart, both are types of the rising, dying god. And Melkart slept for half the year, which may be why Elijah told the priests of Baal to call louder because he might be sleeping. Of course, I can only speculate, but I note the connection between Nimrod, Apollo, and Abaddon, Apollyon at CERN, and the history of the region are all highly curious. Apollo was worshipped by the Romans of that area, as well as the Greeks and in central France. Apollo was equated with the Celtic god Atep Omerus. These two characters were combined to create Apollo Atep Omerus, which can be translated as great horseman or possessing a great horse. In the Celtic belief, horses were closely related to the sun. The interesting thing to note is the connection between this idea of Apollo being associated with horses in France, where part of the LHC and CERN resides, and what the book of Revelation states about Abaddon, where it says, "And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were as it were crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon." End quote. I also note that Revelation chapter 9, after describing how these devil worshippers will be judged during the Great Tribulation period, it ends in verse 21 saying, "Neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries," which is the Greek pharmakia, "nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts." Now, pharmakia is the word that describes the ancient occultic effort to use mind-expanding drugs during rituals in order to open a doorway for making contact with unseen supernatural entities. So, given these descriptions, is it possible that CERN will have something to do with the opening of the bottomless pit described in Revelation 9?
In your opinion, are we living in the end times?
Yeah. We are now living in the most prophetic time since the first coming of Jesus Christ. I could take an hour or two and prove that to you. We don't have that kind of time right now, but we really are. I preach and teach on it all the time, and I've written books on it. And this prophecy conference I'm doing, I spent an hour and a half talking about why it is and how we know that we are living in the most prophetic times since the first coming of Jesus. And I'm trying to wake up the church. Look, we're living in very prophetic times. Israel's back in the land. Jerusalem now belongs to Israel. You know, the Middle East is on fire. Syria has collapsed. Turkey's collapsing into an Ottoman Empire. Russia's in alignment with Persia. Persia and North Korea. China's got their first military base out of their nation. I mean, on and on. The borders are collapsing. Western culture's being overrun by political correctness. Then to think of the technology explosion. And I love technology. I'm a techno geek. So I'm not one of those old guys that say, well, that newfangled stuff, that's of the devil. Well, but here's the deal. We have eaten of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So every technological boom that comes forward, CRISPR-Cas9, that's amazing. Genetic editing, that's astounding. Can we use it for good? Absolutely. We can bless people's lives. But
Is it going to be used only for good? Absolutely not. In fact, now it's already perverted and perverse, and we have not yet seen the bottom of that dark hole. All right? Robotics and artificial intelligence. Can we use that for good? Oh my gosh, it would just make the whole world transformed in some wonderful ways. But the problem is, we build robots, we put artificial intelligence, and then the makers of it say, I know what, let's have sex with it. It's just the perversion is uncontrollable. Pandora's box has been opened. And when you put all this stuff together, and then you understand that we're the first generation in humankind to see the convergence of all this stuff since the return of Israel, just 70 years ago. Just 70 years, our historical lifetime. You and I, neither one of us are 70 years old, but you and I both grew up with Israel has always been there in our lifetime, but it really hasn't. It's just been 7 little decades. 7 little decades. It's been there. 2,700 years before that, there was no Israel. Yet the word of God said in the last days, I'm bringing it back, and I'm paraphrasing, but God says it in Ezekiel 38, 39, says it in Deuteronomy 4, and several other scriptures. In paraphrasing, he says, and when I do this, then the nations will know that I am the Lord, and there is no other. I will bring them back in the sight of the nations. This will be my witness to the nations that I am the Lord. And I'm going to paraphrase and add this because this is the implication of it, and that we are in the last days. When you see Israel return, we're 70 years. We're just a few months the other side of Jerusalem being restored, another 2,700-year-old prophecy that we're living in the midst of, and 98% of the pastors in America never mentioned it. And to this day haven't mentioned it. So yes, we're living in the end times, and what that means is we're getting so close to the return of the Lord. Now I know there's going to be an antichrist system, but as horrific as that is, if we understand the scriptures correctly, it's just a short period. I mean, 7 years maybe. Yeah, that's what most of the charts and graphs and maps say, if they're correct of taking that literally. 7 years. Well, what's 7 years? I remember 7 years ago like it was yesterday. I mean, time's moving. And it's coming like a flood, just like the Word of God said. So I know that's got to happen, but that could happen in our lifetime.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and then, well, where's the rapture? There's raptures at pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib. Some people say there's not even a rapture. I happen to believe the scripture is very clear. There is some kind of a protecting, a taking out, a taking away, a catching away. Those words are actually used, as you probably know, in the original languages, and they're translated into the English. So the bottom line is we're living in the most prophetic time since the first coming of Jesus Christ, because the next big prophecy prior to his second coming was the return of Israel. Well, we're there. Then the return of Jerusalem to Israel. Well, we're there. Then the collapse of Middle Eastern nations, Syria particularly, the joining of Russia and Persia, and, you know, all this stuff. Well, that's happening. Terrorism, men's hearts will fail them because of the terror of those days. Well, we're there. I mean, you could go on and on and on. Christian persecution will be worse than ever before, Jesus said. And I know that when people look at that, they say, well, that's in the middle of the Great Tribulation. Maybe so, but all I know is all of the stats, all of the people that collect this information have recorded very, very accurately and faithfully that in our generation, there are more Christians put to death every day and every year than collectively in the entirety of Christianity before us. So we are already living in the prophecy of Jesus, where he said, in those last days before the return of the Son of Man, you'll be put to death, you'll be killed by the sword, and it'll be worse than anything before. It'll be, and already it is. Now, people might be screaming at me right now saying, but it's going to get worse. I think it is. I think you're right. All I'm saying is we're already there. So you began by asking the question, you know, are we living in the last days? Now, I want to make sure that your audience understands this. And I'm sure most of them do, but you're always getting new viewers and listeners and new Christians, new people to the word. So when the Bible speaks of last days, and you ask me, are we in the last days? Yes, we are. I'm not setting dates. I don't know. Antichrist, the return of the Lord, that could happen in our lifetime. It may be 100 years from now, maybe 200 years from now, but I doubt it. And I could be wrong, but I doubt it. It might be 2,000 more years from now, but I doubt it. Just everything's coming together so quickly. And I truly believe part of that countdown clock is the return of Israel. And so that's happened, and we're 70 years. That's a prophetic, profound number. You know, I'm not trying to do numerology here, but the Bible speaks heavily. The 70 weeks of Daniel, 7 times 10, the 10 commandments, the number of God's administration, 7, perfection, completion, 70 years. God is a God of math and numbers and intelligence and design. And so the Word of God is designed with that intelligence embedded in it, and a lot of it's wrapped around numbers. And so here we are, we're 70 years the other side of Israel. We're the only generation to see all of this happening. And it's basically all, the clock started ticking on all this when Jerusalem was restored. Just think about it. When Israel was restored to the land in 1948, when that happened, people watched it on a grainy black and white television. If you were lucky, because you had to have an antenna high enough, and there were 3 networks, and if you were lucky, you got one of them. If you were in a city, you might have gotten 2 or 3. And that was information systems back then. That was the technology. Now, I mean, we didn't have a remote control. I mean, 1948, remote control was, hey, son, get up, turn the TV up, change the channel. That was remote control. The children were the remote control in 1948. We didn't have anything. But here's Israel. Now think, in 70 little short years, 7 little decades, not even a whole lifetime of most humans. Look what's happened. From grainy black and white television, the restoration of Israel, technology has exploded. I mean, we're into quantum computing and genetic editing and CRISPR-Cas9 and instantaneous information communication networks and satellite and cable and 24/7 news cycle and military machinery and equipment and circumnavigating the globe and nuclear-powered submarines and aircraft carriers and space shuttles and space probes out in deep space beyond our galaxy. From a black and white TV 7 decades ago to this, and it's still exploding. AI, robotics. I mean, it's unbelievable. And this has only happened in 1 generation. And all of these things we've talked about are coming like this. So ask me again, do I think we're in the end times? Yes, absolutely we are. I don't think it, I know it.
When is the beast going to arise? The end of the age of Pisces. And what's really fascinating is that you have Yuval Noah Harari out there, the famous proponent of transhumanism, who's like the spokesperson for the global elite as it pertains to transhumanism. And Harari is out there saying that we are the last generation of Homo sapiens. He says 100 to 200 years from now, the Earth will be populated by a post-human species. Is it coincidental that Harari's projections correspond to the end of the age? And Armageddon and the beast making war with God, the post-human army? It's not coincidental that at the end of the age, even according to these futurists, then Harari's prediction about the end of humanity and the rise of a post-human species puts us right at the end of the age, when we know the beast is coming, according to the calculation of the number of the beast. 6 times 6 times 6.
So the book of Revelation, you've probably heard of it before, but what does it really say about the end of the world? I found this old VHS tape from the 80s that really explains the book of Revelation. So I'm going to play you this old tape that I found. Keep in mind, it's very old. It was recorded in the 80s. The quality of the audio was terrible and the video was terrible. So I did the best I could to kind of clean it up a little bit. It's not perfect, but it is better than what it was. So, all right. So here it is, the book of Revelation.
Means in place of Christ.
This world leader will be the most popular man that has ever walked the planet Earth. He will be embraced by the whole world as the man of the hour. He's going to bring an apparent peace. He will rise as a finance man, a peacemaker, but emerges as the most powerful dictator that the world has ever seen.
He will be a dynamic, mesmerizing public speaker. Apparently, this is the way he will literally sway the world. And it talks about him winning the hearts of the world, not just taking power over them, but he wins their hearts. He convinces them that he is the one who can bring world peace and prosperity and security. He's a convincer. He's able to persuade people like no one ever has before. The Bible also speaks of him as having supernatural powers, doing signs and wonders. He's going to be a very convincing act. He's going to be the most attractive leader. There's a tendency, because of our spiritual orientation, to paint him in evil colors, and that is certainly valid, but it won't be apparent to the secular world. He is going to be the peacemaker. He's going to solve problems that no one has been able to solve to date, and as such will be embraced by the general population. He will be a media man's dream. He's not going to have to shoot his way into power. The people of the world, disillusioned with disorder and bankruptcy and all these individual and intractable problems and drive-by shootings and revolutions and the manageable state of world affairs, they will welcome a great world leader, the man with a plan. Every tribe, every tongue, every nation will worship him, not just follow him, but worship him. It speaks of him as being a miracle worker, a person who will appear to be a very good man. In fact, many characteristics of Messiah will be found in him. But I believe that, as Revelation 13 describes, he will be personally indwelt by Satan.
He is energized by and the pawn of a final scheme by Satan himself. And Satan's attempt to counterfeit the real Messiah in an attempt to thwart God's purpose.
This false Messiah is portrayed in Revelation as a rider on a white horse, the first of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. His control of the world becomes so complete that no one will be able to buy or sell anything without his mark of 666 in their right hand or on their forehead. Anyone taking his mark is doomed to spend eternity in hell. All who refuse to take his mark, called the mark of the beast, will be hunted down and killed.
He will force all people to take a mark, called the mark of the beast, without which no man will be able to buy or sell. This will probably be linked to a global cashless economy, which will be introduced in the wake of some economic calamity.
This is not out of the realm of possibility within the very next few years. A strong government then will be able to control every person on the face of the earth. Because when we spend money, they'll know where we spend it. When we receive money, they'll know when we receive it. Every purchase we make is going to be recorded. Cash is gone. Everything is digital. You start to pay for the groceries. Your number comes up. The lady or the man says, "I'm sorry, but your number's been deactivated." Then you go back to what the Bible says. And he's given power over money so that people cannot buy, they cannot sell without his mark, without his number, and so on.
According to the Bible, these 7 years will be a time of tremendous deception. The world media will promote this global leader and his agenda. During this period, all religions will be considered equal and unite into one compromised worldwide spiritual organization.
It's interesting that this coming world leader will apparently be successful at causing a universal one world religion. That sounds very appealing to the modern mind, but it is directly antithetical to the teachings of Jesus Christ.
In order to bring the world together as one, it's going to have to be done with a religion. And I think we have that religion just over the horizon. I think it's going to be an occultic religion. It's going to be a pagan religion. It's going to be a religion that will syncretize all of the other religions of the world.
We can naturally presume that he somehow is going to bring together the New Age, Islam, Catholicism, the apostate Christian church, and so forth. There's going to be an integration, not only politically and economically, but...
And we're seeing so much. Even back to Revelation 12 on the 23rd of September, we're just seeing so much.
Ecclesiastically or religiously.
A second person referred to as the false prophet will rise to world power within this organization. This false religious leader will coax everyone into giving their allegiance to the Antichrist by performing great miracles.
The true believer, those that are God's own,
will avoid being deceived only by supernatural means. Jesus says if it were possible, the very elect would be deceived, but fortunately it's not possible. So the elect, that is those that are God's chosen, will be supernaturally protected from the widespread deception on the earth.
This charming world leader's promises of global peace begin to unravel as the other three horsemen of the apocalypse ride across the earth, representing war, famine, and disease, which brings death to 1/4 of the earth's population. Incredibly, the real horrors have yet to begin. Catastrophic earthquakes, destructive meteor showers, and unprecedented natural disasters follow. Although people know these judgments are occurring because of their rebellion against God, they refuse to repent and instead cling even tighter to their false leaders for help. Hail and fire rain down from the sky, causing 1/3 of the earth's vegetation to burn up, 1/3 of the sea creatures to die, and 1/3 of the ships at sea to be destroyed. 1/3 of the fresh water supply becomes poisoned, while the sun, moon, and stars are darkened to 1/3 of their light. In 90 AD, the prophet John saw these future events unfold in a vision from God. He obediently recorded them in a section of the Bible called Revelation. There, he describes sadistic creatures not of this earth that come to torment people. Their torture is so bad that people beg to die. As if all this wasn't enough, an army of 200 million kills another 1/3 of the remaining population with fire.
During this whole 7-year period of time, there will be earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tidal waves, natural disasters of every sort, which will produce great devastation throughout the earth. In addition to nuclear warfare and all the horrors that go along with it, there will be plagues, famines, diseases. The Bible says that more than half of the people who will be alive in the earth will die within that 7-year period of time.
Man is now saying, I am autonomous. I am master of my own destiny. I can handle everything. And by the way, he's going to get the chance. That's why the tribulation comes to pass, because God speaks to autonomous man and says, you have bragged about how you can run the world. Here's your chance. And he runs the world into the ground. Except those days be shortened, there should no flesh be saved.
During the first half of the tribulation, 2 miracle-working prophets of God based in Jerusalem tell the world's population why God is judging them. They also proclaim God's free gift of salvation available through belief in God's Son, Jesus Christ. Exactly 3.5 years into the 7th-year period, the world leader kills these 2 prophets and enters the rebuilt Jewish temple in Jerusalem. There, he demands the entire world worship him as God. Those carrying the 666 mark become infected with awful sores. All sea life dies and the remaining fresh water becomes polluted. People chew their tongues in pain and curse God, refusing to turn from their evil deeds of murdering, stealing, witchcraft. The worst earthquake in history strikes, leveling the cities of the world. Hailstones.
And that's the pole shift AV was talking about the other day, guys. I agree with her on that.
Weighing more than 50 pounds each rain down from the sky, crushing everything with their devastating impact. Finally, the armies of the world gather together in the Jezreel Valley to instigate the infamous and deadly battle of Armageddon. This all-out confrontation almost annihilates mankind, but is stopped when Jesus Christ returns to planet Earth in the clouds. The entire world witnesses Christ's return.
So there it is, the book of Revelation. Now, keep in mind, this was written 2,000 years ago. And you might be saying, well, how do we know it wasn't changed? We know it wasn't changed because we have the original documents still. We have the original documents that were written in the original languages.
Isn't it interesting the way Hollywood is beating this drum about the return of the Titans? Thanos, the Mad Titan, Sam Worthington, who was in Clash of the Titans and Wrath of the Titans, starred in a movie last year who went straight to Netflix called The Titan, and the new Godzilla movie where they have rebranded them. They're no longer Mutos, which is what, monsters of unusual size or whatever. They've rebranded them as the Titans, the original and rightful rulers of Earth. Because again, presenting them as Titans, the original and rightful rulers of the Earth. The Titans are still around. In fact, I argue in my book, Last Clash of the Titans, that they are somehow still influencing things on this Earth, even though they are currently chained in the abyss. Revelation 9 says they're going to get out for 5.5 months at the end. When the Nephilim return, and we understand that the Nephilim, the spirits of the Nephilim that were destroyed in the days of Noah, in the flood, were barred entrance into the afterlife, into the netherworld, into heaven, basically condemned to roam the earth. That was the belief of the early church. That was the belief of the Jews in the time of Jesus and through all, the Old Testament period. It wasn't until Augustine in about the 5th century that belief went away. He also basically turned the church away from believing that the Nephilim had been created at all. Ezekiel, though, saw it. And this is the thing. God bless people like Eli Marzulli who've been, teaching this for a long time. He's right. The Nephilim are returning. Where I differ with LA, and, I've got to give him credit because without him and his book Nephilim, which was a novel that got me down this path, I wouldn't be here right now.
Wow.
But I think Ezekiel 39 is a clue, but you got to understand the worldview of the prophets to understand what Ezekiel was writing. In Ezekiel 39, he's writing about the culmination of the war of Gog and Magog. And Gog was the Old Testament Antichrist figure. Okay? He's the figure that John in the book of Revelation calls the Antichrist. That is the same war that culminates with the Battle of Armageddon, which is fought for the Har Moed, God's Mount of Assembly, which is Zion, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Ezekiel says, God said that he will prepare a place in Israel for burial of Magog, the forces of Magog. The Valley of the Travelers east of the sea refers to east of the Dead Sea, and it will block the travelers. The key is understanding that travelers in the Old Testament concept, in the Old Testament world, were spirits that would travel or cross over from one plane of existence to another. In other words, the realm of the dead to the land of the living. And the places where he identifies east of the Dead Sea are places that during the Exodus, stations of the Exodus, refer to a couple of places that are named for these interactions with the spirit realm. One of the stops in the Exodus, one of the stations of the Exodus is called Ovoth, which means spirits of the dead. It's based on a root word Ov, which means medium. The medium of Endor that Saul went to see was the Ov of Endor.
Wow.
In fact, one of the giants killed by David's men, Ishbi, they condensed the word. Ishbi Benab is how it looks to us in English. Ishbi Ben Ov. Ishbi, son of the necromancer, son of the medium. And he was of the descendants of the Rapha, the sons of the Rephaim. The Rephaim were these spirits that the Amorites, the Canaanites, believed were the spirits of the mighty men who were of old, the ancestors of their kings. They were called in Canaanite texts, called by scholars the Rephaim texts, written about the time of the Judges, where these Rephaim were summoned through necromancy rituals to the tabernacle of El, Mount Hermon, where El, they believed, would speak words of revivification to resurrect these spirits that were called warriors of Baal. And in these texts, they're described as warriors. They mount their chariots and they travel first one day and then another. And at dawn of the third day, they arrive to be resurrected. Like Jesus, who went down and preached and proclaimed to the spirits in prison until dawn of the third day, when he arrived, except that he really was resurrected. And Ezekiel, in Ezekiel 39 says, this is where these travelers will be buried. Another one that stops on them. In fact, the mountain where Moses was led by God to get his only view of the Holy Land, the Promised Land, climbed this mountain of the Avarim. In Hebrew, that means travelers. Mount Nebo is the mountain of the travelers. It's right there across from Jericho in the plains of Moab. And that's where this demonic army will fall. Now, I believe that the Nephilim will return. I believe they're going to be the demons who possess a human army. I think by this point, the restrainer will have been removed. The church will be removed. So I pray I'm right, that we won't be here for that day, because that's the day of Armageddon. And when this demonic army comes against Jerusalem to try to claim God's Mount of Assembly, just like Lucifer in Isaiah 14, I will establish my Mount of Assembly on Mount Zaphon, raise himself above the stars, the angels of God. On that day, when God personally takes the battlefield, which Ezekiel describes.
Oh, good God. Gluten-free is now worry-free.
The travelers will be destroyed. And interestingly, in that verse in Ezekiel 39, he says, then the world will know I am the Holy One in Israel. That phrase is similar to one that we see in the Old Testament many times. The Holy One of Israel. Ezekiel 39, after he destroys the Antichrist army in the war of the Battle of Armageddon that ends the war of Gog and Magog, he becomes the Holy One in Israel because he's on the battlefield. So yes, that is when, I mean, the Nephilim have always been here. If they're the spirits of those who died in the flood, they've always been with us because demons have always been with us. But on that day, they will be inhabiting the bodies of I believe, this army that comes against Israel. It will literally be an army of the evil dead. Like the ultimate zombie apocalypse. God puts a stop to it. And what does it mean when Ezekiel writes in Ezekiel 39:11, it will block the travelers? The word translated block is only used one other place in the Bible. It's in Deuteronomy, the verse that talks about thou shalt not muzzle an ox when he treads out the grain. Muzzle. I'm not quite sure what that means, but if we take it in context of what Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 15, that we shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. We will be resurrected. Maybe that's what God is saying. I will block the travelers. They're dead, and they are staying dead when the rest of us are resurrected into new glorified bodies.
You have no idea how many. You have no idea what's coming. We smell Christian blood. We are waiting for our day. And when the call is given, millions of us will be released. And they looked at me and said, you believe in revivals and you believe in Pentecost and the power of God. You believe in all that. We believe.
Well, I'll tell you what, Han, Canada's one of the leading villains in politics, aren't they? That Trudeau, gee, does some wicked things. Haven't you got full-term abortions there as well? Canada's really, wow.
In the Black Awakening, a multi-continental release of power to activate the program Demonized, where they've weaponized the demonic powers to these super soldiers.
Are they waiting for a specific time to unleash their power?
Yeah, they are, because they have to do it at the moment the Antichrist is, like you read in 2 Thessalonians 2, that...
Yeah, I hate how the guys who are in the euthanasia, they say die with dignity. Murder is not dignity. Dying with dignity, it's getting murdered.
It's caught the echo. The restrainer is holding back the apocalypse of the Antichrist, the unveiling in his movement. So right now he's held restrained. Soon as he who restrains is removed, soon as that occurs, we have White Horse, the release of the Antichrist. Instantly, we have the release of the red. It says the whole earth. Arena, peace is taken to the whole earth, and all of a sudden, it doesn't give the details, but all of a sudden, on a global scale, people are released to begin to, the Greek word is sphadzo, slaughter, begin to slaughter people. It's used of animal ritual butchery to begin to slaughter individuals. That's exactly how they defined it to be back in the 90s. And we've heard this again and again and again. So that scenario fits the Masonic version of Chaos Before a New Order. It fits Father Meridon from the Cathedral of the Black Goat, his book, The Devil's Bible. It fits that scenario too. So some of the oldest, darkest occultists, the idea of chaos first, a collapsing of everything so that a new order can rise. That's all by design. And we've been given the heads up in prophecy, but all prophecy has boots on the ground. It'll all, eventually happen. So I do believe that millions and millions of these trained, programmed, altered, demonized super soldiers, whether we want to say it or not, they believe they're being raised to help bring the Antichrist in.
I think the things that we're seeing today is setting the stage for that. They're having to implode America from the inside in order to bring it down so that they can have a global agenda being fulfilled, so that order out of chaos. There's all these things that we're seeing being fulfilled today. It's because of these people following the orders that they get from their rituals, using the power that they've obtained to be able to bring this about. They're hell bent on seeing this come to pass. And the end deal, I mean, if you look at what the Bible says about it, we're living in these times. Matthew 24 is even more applicable today than it was when it was written. The book of Revelation, same thing, all of it really. It's more applicable today, and it's necessary that we're standing strong in that, standing steadfast in it. Because without it, what hope do we have? Without it, it's going to be like the people taking a knee to Baal. They're going to see this supernatural world king come in, who's going to be filled with the spirit of Satan, literally embodied inside of this human being. So he's going to be doing lying signs and wonders. He's going to have the answers that everybody needs to bring peace in. And the way that you do that is you have to have this problem. This is the Hegelian dialectic. You have this solution that you want to get to. So you create a problem, get the people to react and say, hey, we need to go. Somebody needs to do something about this. And so they'll gladly accept what the end is. They'll gladly accept this next solution. Kind of like, let's use it with the police system right now. Well, we need to defund the police. We really need to go do something about this. Okay, well, we've actually got this new police set up over here, And so they've got these new laws and guidelines. We've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. So here, take this new police. Well, that's also, part of this one world system that we've been looking at for a long time. What we can expect is a one world currency. We're seeing the economic system just go to crap because middle class or middle America has not been able to work. We're seeing the implosion of the dollar take place right now because of middle class America not being able to work and provide for themselves. We're seeing people being more dependent on the government to give them help. The elitists, they've already got all the money in the world, so they're sitting back just watching it go to hell.
The first thing I think that people need to take away is that we've been lied to. A lot of people get offended when you start talking about these types of issues. In Proverbs, it says that, a fool is going to discount a topic without looking into it. And that's what I see in America.
The vax does that, mutates your DNA, but I don't think they'd have a euthanasia thing for it.
I see a lot of Americans, and they're just quick to discount things, write you off without even looking into it. Those people who refuse the truth, they're going to be given over to a reprobate mind. They're going to be deceived. And I tell people, you don't have to be deceived. We're living in an age of technology. We're living in an age of information. We can just go to the Library of Congress. We can just go research these things. And so I tell people, take from this film real information, let it change your paradigm if need be, and move forward without having scales on your eyes. Look, we don't know how much time we have on this earth, but we do know that Jesus is going to return. When he does, we need to make sure that we're in good standing with him. We need to make sure that we are not deceived by this global scheme of the Antichrist.
And I feel like the humanity, they're going to melt it all down. Just-in-time shipping. No one knowing how to grow anything or make anything anymore. It's all building this house of cards really, really tall. They're going to pull out the bottom card. They're going to let the cities depopulate themselves. They're going to reduce the population back, just like the Georgia Guidestones mentioned. They're going to let all of that happen, and they're going to birth this out of our desperation. And when our moment of need, when we're hungry, when we're dying, and then add need and want into it, desperate times, you're talking about total chaos. I mean, yeah, I read stories of sailors who are abandoned at sea and in lifeboats. And it only takes a week and a half for them to be eating each other. And we're talking about hardened military men that are believers. And what are you looking at? Miami, Baltimore, St. Louis, LA. What are these inner cities going to do when they're used to living off Monster Energy drinks and ho-hos? And all of a sudden, this whole thing is pulled out. What is that going to look like? So you add want and need onto altering ourselves into something else. And
wow.
Like I said, there has never been a time like it before and never will be again. And if the date...
Wow, Diane, that's shocking. They're going to force them into psych wards.
We're not shortened.
Well, not them. They're going to force us.
There would be no flesh left alive. And he will shorten those days for those few people that hang on. So there's a multi-pronged solution. One, get right in your life with the Father. So believe on Yeshua, Jesus the Christ. Repent, which means turning away from it, following the commands and getting your life right, and reading the Word. And I would also say to people, start looking at getting out of the system where you can, when you can. If you're looking at land, get 3 acres. Start to learn what it's like to plant things again, to hunt, to buy firearms. Not as a prepper. We're not doing bunkers.
Diane, you post so many, very informative, so I don't remember each one individually.
Okay, because you're starting to...
I try to.
Prep and prepare for some bad times, but not changing who you are or your lifestyle. I'm saying go back to the old ways, start getting your hands dirty in the dirt again, get away from the TV and the video games, and start giving yourself an escape hatch to freedom that's beneficial anyway. You're going to be eating organic tomatoes out of your own garden, regardless if the economy goes down. So you start to change your lifestyle as much as you can and start working think of a business idea where you can work for yourself or work in a manner where you can be with your families, get out of the commutes.
There is a solution. There's one solution. His name's Jesus. That's it. There's no fear if you're in Christ. You've got love in him. You've got peace in him. You've got joy in him. Things are going to get worse, but the Bible tells us that regardless of circumstance, regardless of any kind of situation that is presented against us, whether be it by the wrath of man, whether it be the wrath of Satan, or even the battle that we have between the spirit and the flesh on a daily basis, the Lord is our solution. The Lord provides all of our needs, and it's according to his riches and glory. So I would just say that yes, there is hope. Things are going to get bad. They're going to get they're going to get worse. But the hope is that all these things that we're seeing, it's more evidence that the Bible's true. And so that gives me strength, and to be able to see other members of the body of Christ not bowing the knee to Baal, continuing to stay steadfast and continuing to stay in the Word. That's the solution we need. That's the only solution. That's how we become overcomers in Christ. So it's basically, choose this day to whom you will serve. Are you going to be going along with the kingdoms of this world, or are you going to go and be a part of the kingdoms of Christ? I guess the focus that I want to continue to push to everybody is that be heavenly minded. Think on things with a heavenly perspective. All of these things are temporal. Your current affliction is temporary, but it's nowhere compared to the riches and weight and glory that we have waiting for us. And it's all to the glory. Whether we live, whether we die, Christ, it's gain.
I have goosebumps, people.
Hang on, where was it? It didn't load. Hang on, guys. Right, my video. There it is there. But it didn't. Oh, because there was an ad. Didn't load because there was an ad. You got to wait for the ad before it loads.
Puts us right at the end of the age. Puts us right at the end of the age when we know the beast is coming. According to the calculation of the number of the beast. 6 times 6 times 6. So this whole thing of 666 is no, it's 6 times 6 times 6. See, it's the precessional number of an age. age of Pisces. We know when the beast will arise at the age of Pisces. So, are we at the end of the age? Yes, we are. We're at the beginning of the end of the age. And in the end of these ages is always a very
cataclysmic,
chaotic,
yeah,
disruptive transitional period. We're already beginning to get into the rumblings of this disruption. But we don't understand because we forgot how to use the celestial timepiece.
Okay.
My name is Timothy Albrino, and you are watching End Times Productions. What I try to do is to tell that story from beginning to end. Again, that story that began to ruminate in my heart back in the Amazon and came out of me when I was writing this book. And I believe that it's a very timely book because we are in fact living at the beginning of the end of the age. And that doesn't mean that the end of the age is tomorrow. In fact, I believe we can calculate the end of the age. And in fact, by calculating the end of the age, I mean we can calculate the number of the beast, which we're told to do in Revelation. The number of the beast is not 666 or 666. The number of the beast is the number of a man, 6. Why is the number of a man 6? Because God created man on the 6th day. The number of the man is 6. So it's not 666 or 666. Well, it is 666, but it's not 666 as a whole number. It's 6, 6, 6. So when you have 3 numbers like that, 6, 6, and 6, and you're told to calculate those numbers, what do? And it's universal, by the way. Mathematics, universal across the globe. When you have 3 numbers like that and you calculate them, you always multiply them. 6 times 6 times 6, 216, which is a derivative of 2,160, which is the exact number of years that it takes to complete one age, one processional age, which is how the ancients measured the ages. Christ, his birth corresponded with the age of Pisces. Again, inaugurating the age of Pisces. That's why Jesus was represented by a fish, because the fish is the symbol of Pisces. And the early Christians knew that the age of Pisces had been
Yeah, he's got 5 hours, Diane. Hey, it's a long time.
Inaugurated with the birth of the Son of God, with the birth of the Messiah. And so Pisces, the fish, became the symbol of Christ in the early church. It was the age of Christ, the age of Pisces. And Jesus said at the end of the age, what age was he referring to? This one. This age, the one in which he was born. At the end of this age, these things would happen. And then in Revelation, calculate the number of the beast. 666. 6 times 6 times 6. 216. Again, in the ancient world, you could take that 0 off and it still represents the same number. 2,160. It's the duration of a processional age. So literally the beast, when is the beast going to arise? At the end of the age of Pisces. When is the end of the age of Pisces? 2,160 years from the inauguration of the age of Pisces, from the birth of Christ, who was born sometime around 4 BC. So you calculate from the birth of Christ 2,160 years. We're in the year 2022. So you add on the 4 BC, because Jesus wasn't born on 1 AD, he was born probably around 4 to 5 BC. So that puts us around really 2026 or thereabouts. So 2026, 25 years since the birth of Christ, and an age has 2,160 years. We're getting pretty close, but it's not tomorrow, right? People get mad at me for saying that, but it's not tomorrow. It's at the end of the age of Pisces, the transition into the age of Aquarius. So, and what's really fascinating is that you have Yuval Noah Harari out there, the famous proponent of transhumanism, who's like the spokesperson for the global elite as it pertains to transhumanism. And Harari is out there saying that we are the last generation of Homo sapiens. And he says 100 to 200 years from now, the Earth will be populated by post-human species. Is it coincidental that Harari's projections correspond to the end of the age? And Armageddon and the beast making war with God, the post-human army? It's not coincidental that at the end of the age, even according to these futurists, so if we're in, let's say 2025 years from the birth of Christ, and the end of the age isn't until 2160 years, then Harari's prediction about the end of humanity and the rise of a post-human species puts us right at the end of the age when we know the beast is coming, according to the calculation of the number of the beast. 6 times 6 times 6. So this whole thing of 666 is no, it's 6 times 6 times 6. See, it's the precessional number of an age, the age of Pisces. We know when the beast will arise at the age of Pisces. So are we at the end of the age? Yes, we are. We're at the beginning of the end of the age. And in the end of these ages is always a very chaotic, disruptive, transitional period. And we're already beginning to get into the rumblings of this disruption. And so everything is like culminating toward the end of the age of Pisces. This isn't astrology. This is astronomy. And this is how the ancients calculated the ages, including the ancient Hebrews, who used the Mazzaroth. And the Mazzaroth was the zodiac. This is not astrology, making predictions about your life and so forth. That's astrology. This is astronomy. And indeed, I would say to confirm this position for those who don't think that.
I can't even see us going 10 years. I would truly be absolutely stunned if we were here in 10 years. I think it's over in 2028, like that channel name 2028 says. And Tom Horn's been on that channel, so it's got a bit of got a reputation. Yeah, I'd be surprised if we're here in 10 years.
Using these kinds of predictions based on precession of the equinox and so forth is biblically valid. I would challenge people with something that nobody yet that I'm aware of has.
I think 24 will be the start of tribulation, 2024.
Has realized regarding the birth of Christ. So the birth of Christ corresponded with the age of Pisces, the inauguration of the age of Pisces. What most people don't realize is that there is a prophecy in the Old Testament that tells us exactly when Christ would be born. And it's no wonder that the astronomers from the East, the wise men from the East, knew that Christ was born. And this is part of the reason why the great king, the eternal king, had been born. Because they were watching the sky.
Okay, let's see what he actually said. Because he's talking that much maths. If you don't pay attention and you talk on the chat, you lose what he says. So, yeah, let's see what he says.
The transition into the age of Aquarius. So, and what's really fascinating is that you have Yuval Noah Harari out there, the famous proponent of transhumanism, who's like the spokesperson for the global elite as it pertains to transhumanism. And Harari is out there saying that we are the last generation of Homo sapiens. He says, 100 to 200 years from now, the Earth will be populated by post-human species.
Okay, so he's not saying we're going to be here in 100 years' time. He's saying what the other dude said.
Is it coincidental that
because he couldn't be a Christian and think we're here for another 100 years. Because he's up to the times. He knows what's going on. He knows more than us. This guy's a half-baked scholar. So,
are these projections correspond to the end of the age?
No.
In Armageddon and the beast making war with God, the post-human army? It's not coincidental that at the end.
Hang on.
That we are the last generation of Homo sapiens. He says, 100 to 200 years from now, the Earth will be populated by a post-human species. Is it coincidental that Harari's projections correspond to the end of the age?
Ah, you're right, Han. He's saying the end of the age is 100 years away.
In Armageddon and the beast making war with God, the post-human army, it's not coincidental that at the end of the age, even according to these futurists, so if we're in, let's say 2025 years from the birth of Christ, and the end of the age isn't until 2160 years, then Harari's prediction about the end of humanity and the rise of a post-human species puts us right at the end of the age when we know the beast is coming, according to the calculation of the number of the beast. 6 times 6 times 6.
Okay, guys, I don't want to watch this one anymore. When they're errant like that, I don't want to watch it. So I'm going to switch to something else, which I had nothing lined up for. But let's say, Mob, the Pope is hiding something ancient from the public. We'll watch that. So what do you reckon, guys? Keep watching Tim or change channel? I'll change channel and come back to him if you just want that.
This is 50 years of reliability.
Have you ever wondered what's up with the Catholic Church? I mean, they're supposed to be representatives of Christ on earth. So then why is their history filled with so much death and destruction? And it's not just their history. Even in modern times, hundreds, if not thousands of priests have been caught committing evil acts to the very people they're supposed to be helping. So what's going on here? What if I told you that the Vatican itself does not represent the biblical Jesus Christ, but rather the Prince of Darkness himself? That's right, Lucifer.
I notice your voice, God remind Habemus Papa. Announce to you that we have a Father. The world had a Father.
And now all of a sudden he's our Holy Father. And we're pledging him our love and our allegiance and our loyalty and our prayer.
Everyone says there hasn't been anyone like him. That's what's so fascinating. And people of all faiths want to touch him.
Yeah. Well, that's an appeal too. You know, we call him the Holy Father.
Holy Father, please forgive me.
Holy Father, you'll hear that.
And Han, when he's telling people it's 100 years off, when it happens in next year, these guys aren't going to understand what's happening. They're going to get caught unaware because he told them to expect it 100 years' time. So it's sort of dangerous. That's why I didn't want to watch him.
Quite often. This man, Bergoglio, Francis the Talking Pope, his predecessors, John Paul II, Pope Benedict, John Paul I, Pope Paul, Pope John the 23rd, Pope Pius.
You can go all.
I'm just going to say this about what Alberino said about the 100 years' time. I know he's not wrong. I don't have to add up numbers. I can see what's happening. I know what's happening. Everything the Bible says happens in the last days is happening now. So I don't need to do the numbers for that. I'm not very good with maths anyway. So Timothy Alberino is way off.
The way back, folks. I'm talking centuries.
These men are replacement gods. And these men have taken upon themselves the title of Holy Father.
He wears the titles of God. He wears the title Holy Father, head of the church. He never died for the church, but he stole that title from Christ.
Jesus said, "And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven." Yet the popes took to themselves the name Holy Father, along with all claims of authority that might be assumed by such a title. Pope Innocent III, who fathered the Inquisition, said, "The Pope holdeth place on earth, not simply of a man, but of the true God. Meanwhile, Pope Nicholas said of himself, I am in all and above all, so that God himself and I, the Vicar of God, have both one consistory, and I am able to do almost all that God can do. I then, being above all, seem by this reason to be above all gods. Nicholas even claimed that the popes had the power to change the gospel itself, saying, Wherefore, no marvel, if it be in my power to dispense with all things, yea, with the precepts of Christ. But in the Bible, Jesus says, Behold, I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it, and no man openeth. The Apostle Paul warned that, if any man or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel unto you, let him be accursed. Yet despite these biblical warnings, the popes repeatedly claimed they were equal to and above God, and were even called by Catholics our Lord God, the Pope. The Lateran Council, while addressing Pope Julius II, said to him, Take care that we lose not that salvation, that life and breath which thou hast given us. For thou art shepherd, thou art physician, thou art governor, thou art husbandman, thou finally art another God on earth. In the 19th century, Cardinal Giuseppe Sarto, who would later become Pope Pius X, declared, The Pope is not simply the representative of Jesus Christ. On the contrary, he is Jesus Christ himself, under the veil of the flesh. Does the Pope speak? It is Jesus Christ who is speaking. Hence, when anyone speaks of the Pope, it is not necessary to examine, but to obey. Jesus said of himself, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man.
Yeah, I like Timothy Alvarino too, but I just got turned off what he just said 20 minutes ago.
And cometh unto the Father, but by me. Yet Pope Pius IX blasphemously declared, I alone am the successor of the apostles, the vicar of Jesus Christ. I am the way, the truth, and the life. The popes have not only made claims to be God, but have insisted that salvation itself depends directly upon obedience to them. Pope Boniface VIII said, We declare, say, define, and pronounce that it is absolutely necessary for the salvation of every human creature to be subject to the Roman Pontiff.
Wow.
Pope Clement VI said, No man outside obedience to the Pope of Rome can ultimately be saved. All who have raised themselves against the faith of the Roman Church and died in final impenitence have been damned and gone down to hell. Even in modern times, Pope John XXIII in 1958 declared, Into this fold of Jesus Christ no man may enter, unless he be led by the sovereign pontiff, and only if they be united to him. Can men be saved? In 1984, Pope John Paul II was quoted as saying, Don't go to God for forgiveness of sins. Come to me. The quote was based on a Los Angeles Times article, which reported, rebutting a belief widely shared by Protestants and a growing number of Roman Catholics, Pope John Paul II dismissed the widespread idea that one can obtain forgiveness directly from God. Furthermore, according to traditional Catholicism, obedience to the papacy is said to be required, no matter how dreadful the Pope might be. Catherine of Siena, one of the patron saints of Italy, whose mummified head is still preserved in Rome today, said, Even if the Pope were Satan incarnate, we ought not to raise up our heads against him, but calmly lie down to rest in his bosom. He who rebels against our Father is condemned to death. For that which we do to him, we do to Christ. We honor Christ if we honor the Pope. Such demands for blind obedience were confirmed by the popes themselves, but confronted by the reformers. By men like Martin Luther, who said, "The Pope, possessed by demons, defends his tyranny with the canon, Si Papa, or Yes, Father." This canon states clearly, if the Pope should leave the whole world into the control of hell, he is nevertheless not to be contradicted. It's a terrible thing, but on account of the authority of this man,
Yeah, Hannah, as soon as I saw him with the Pope, I knew he was no good. But I'll say this, with the Chosen, I haven't seen anything where they've gotten really wrong, except for when Christ told Nicodemus to follow your heart, because man's heart's exceedingly wicked. Apart from that, I haven't seen anything that's really wrong.
must lose our souls, which Christ redeemed with his precious blood. Because of this evidence, Luther declared, "I believe the Pope is the masked and incarnate devil, because he is the Antichrist." It is important to understand that this belief was not just confined to Luther, but was held by all the reformers from John Wycliffe in the 14th century to Charles Spurgeon in the late 19th century. Spurgeon said, "It is the bounden duty of every Christian to pray against Antichrist. And as to what Antichrist is, no sane man ought to raise a question. If it be not the Popery in the Church of Rome, there is nothing in the world that can be called by that name." The Westminster Confession of Faith, along with the Savoy Confession, the Old Baptist Confession, and the Methodist views of John Wesley, all included the declaration that the Pope is that Antichrist, that man of sin and son of perdition, that exalteth himself in the church. This was also the belief of the men who translated the King James Bible. In their opening dedication, they commended the king for writing in defense of the truth, which hath given such a blow unto that man of sin as will not be healed. The view of the Antichrist, not as a single man, but of many men in a single office, was based in part on the teaching of John Wycliffe. In the Gospel of Matthew, the disciples asked Jesus, "What shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?" Jesus said to them, "Take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many." Wycliffe believed that the many who say, "I am Christ," are in fact the popes. The Pope's title, Vicarius Christi, literally means another Christ. Wycliffe concluded that Antichrist is thus a monstrous composite. In further explaining the Pope's title, author Dave Hunt writes, "The Latin equivalent of the Greek anti is vicarius, from which comes vicar. Thus, vicar of Christ literally means Antichrist." But the view of the papacy as Antichrist is not widely held by Protestants today. Still, there are those who continue to uphold the Reformers' original beliefs.
Permit me to say how much I
him. God bless him.
This official Vatican portrait of the current Pope. It is called The Truth, the Way, and the Life, Portrait of His Holiness, Pope Benedict XVI. But can this really mean that in the modern world, there are some who still believe the Pope to be equal to Christ and God?
Mr. President, final question.
Yes, sir.
You said famously, when you looked into Vladimir Putin's eyes, you saw his soul.
Yeah.
When you look into Benedict XVI's eyes, what do you see?
God.
Good way to end the interview.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. My pleasure, sir.
We want to show you some extraordinary pictures which came to us from the Vatican on what was, of course, an extraordinary day. Within hours of Pope Benedict announcing that he was to resign, take a look at this. Lightning struck St. Peter's Basilica. You can see it again now in slow motion.
Twice.
Lightning struck St. Peter's Basilica twice immediately following the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI. Now, some people might not make anything of that, but lightning is something in sacred literature that almost always carries spiritual connotation. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's evil, like when Jesus referred to Satan as falling like lightning. And I can't help but think that the timing of two lightning bolts on this particular building, the St. Peter's Basilica,
Let it be established with 2 or 3 witnesses, 2 strikes on the Vatican. There you go.
at the Vatican at the exact time following Benedict's resignation, I felt that it was mathematically improbable of chance. First, because 2 bolts, I don't, again, what do you make of coincidence and numerology? But we know that in sacred text and in scripture, these kind of things would be interpreted as signs and omens.
At the start of Lent last year, Jorge Mario Bergoglio was just a face in the crowd. Today, Pope Francis is the most talked about person on the World Wide Web.
With days until the Holy Father makes his first ever visit to the U.S., his popularity has taken off.
We were able to walk right up to the stage yesterday, which is literally set at this point. You saw that there are thousands of seats already lined up as well. As you can imagine,
hundreds of thousands of people turned out to see and hear Pope Francis today.
It was a mammoth effort. Philadelphia transformed into an outdoor cathedral.
It's like being at the Super Bowl.
The style was different almost immediately. The thousands before him as he bowed and said, "Vi chiedo che voi pray for me."
And suddenly there was a connection with people. That set the tone for this papacy.
More people can actually relate to him. Absolutely. And bring more people into the church.
More of a user-friendly Pope.
Yes. That's what we need right now.
We've needed for a while a renewed image, a renewed face of the church, and Pope Francis is giving it to us.
The one man who is winning in every poll you look at, the Pope.
His Twitter account, @Pontifex, ranks in the top 5 most searched words on the internet.
Take a look. Look who's got his very own rookie baseball card, Pope Francis.
Pope is even showing up on pizza boxes. Every trip he takes, Pope Francis has been met by adoring masses of the faithful.
This week, he's been called a Catholic rock star.
He's kind of a rock star. Times Person of the Year. The cover of Rolling Stone. Now there's even a Francis fanzine. He's captured the imagination not just of the world's 1.2 billion Catholics, but the world itself.
I get it on the streets. I mean, everybody from the bartender to the cab driver telling me, Cardinal Dolan, we love this guy.
He's been called the People's Pope.
I'm a follower of so-and-so. See people going out and giving the rock star treatment and fawning and fainting and screaming and everything when a pope goes by. He's just a man.
Humility has made the former Jorge Bergoglio a star far beyond the Catholic Church,
and became one of the most popular religious leaders of our time.
You can't be a Catholic without acknowledging
Pope Francis as the representative of God on earth.
Chi ritiene di poter avere un rapporto personale, diretto, immediato con Gesù Cristo, al di fuori della comunione e della meditazione della
Okay, you can't read that. It's too small. I'll read out what he's saying.
Giving the rock star treatment and fawning and fainting and screaming and everything when a pope goes by. He's just a man.
Humility has made the former Jorge Bergoglio a star far beyond the Catholic Church,
and became one of the most popular religious leaders of our time.
You can't be a Catholic without acknowledging Pope Francis as the representative of God on earth.
He says,
Chi ritiene di poter avere
there
un
are those
rapporto
who believe you can have a
personale,
personal,
diretto,
direct,
immediato
and
con
immediate
Gesù
relationship with
al di
Jesus
fuori
Christ
della comunione
outside of the
e
communion
della
and meditation
meditazione
of
della
the
Chiesa.
church.
Sono
These
tentazioni
temptations are
pericolose,
dangerous and harmful.
sono tentazioni dannose,
They are
sono, come diceva il grande Paolo
absurd
VI,
dichotomies.
dicotomia.
Okay, so he's saying to have a personal relationship with Christ goes against it. Just does it's dangerous. He said it's dangerous to have a personal relationship with Christ. Wow.
Pope Francis has worked tirelessly toward a new world religion in which all denominations are brought together as one. If you look at Francis's outreach over the past 3 years, and specifically in 2016, you'll find somebody who has openly condemned evangelical Christianity and the belief that you must have a personal relationship with Jesus. He has openly warned that this belief is dangerous. He has also equated the spread of the gospel under evangelical Christianity to jihadism. In the meantime, he has done quite a bit of outreach to every other religion in the entire world. Why is this happening? The extent of Francis's outreach to other denominations in 2016 alone has been mind-boggling. In February, Francis held an emergency meeting with Patriarch Kirill of Russia for the first time since the 1054 Schism. Kirill then went directly to Antarctica, where he performed a bizarre religious ceremony consecrating the land and water surrounding the continent. Francis has also done outreach to Patriarch Bartholomew of Turkey, in which both leaders voiced support for the migrant crisis and called for more migrants to enter Europe. In May, Francis met with Al-Azhar of Egypt, who is the head of Sunni Islam. In January, Francis became the third pontiff ever to visit Rome's major synagogue. He has also hosted Jewish religious and political leaders at the Vatican. In June, Francis outreached to the Armenians. In July, Pope Francis visited Poland and told all of the young people in the audience to, quote, believe in a new humanity.
¿Cuál, María? Una mezcla de vida espiritual. Appuntò una santigna a quien se recorre, per favore, abaixo.
The Pope sat before the image of the Virgin and recited.
Okay, you couldn't see what he said, so I'll just take it back.
Third pontiff ever to visit Rome's major synagogue. He has also hosted Jewish religious and political leaders at the Vatican. In June, Francis outreached to the Armenians. In July, Pope Francis visited Poland and told all of the young people in the audience to, quote, believe in a new humanity.
¿Cuál, María? Una
Mary,
mezcla
a
de
teacher of
vida
spiritual
espiritual.
life,
Appuntò
or a plaster
una
statue,
santigna a quien se
from whom we
recorre,
beg favors at little cost.
per favore, abaixo.
The Pope sat before the image of the Virgin and
Wow, here we go again.
recited the prayer that is most notably known in Fatima, the Rosary.
True, Diane. Very true.
She's called the United Nations International Pilgrim Statue of Fatima and travels around the world.
I've seen people who break down in tears as soon as they look at the face.
The faithful believe they're seeing the face of Jesus' beloved Mother Mary.
The theologians say it's called the aura of the Mother of God around it. That means the Mother of God's presence with that image in such a way that you can look at other images of Our Lady and get your fill. It is one of the 4 original statues made under the guidance of Sister Lucia, the oldest of the 3 children.
Seriously, what's wrong with normal Catholics? They buy into this. They must be really stupid people, seriously.
Children, Lucia, Jacinta, and Francisco said they saw an apparition of Mary while herding sheep near the village of Fatima, Portugal, May 13, 1917, and she revealed 3 secrets to them, including the prediction of World Wars I and II. And this is the face Lucia described.
It's glaring again, guys. Hang on.
You feel her presence. You can get your fill looking at other beautiful images, but you cannot get your fill looking at this. You just want to look again.
Just a Mary shrine here, Mary shrine there, Mary shrine here, everywhere.
Why do people praise and worship Mary, whom Jesus was born of? A famous Catholic bishop and writer, Alphonsus Liguori, explained in his writings that it is far effective to pray to Mary than to Christ.
In the Franciscan Chronicles, it is related that Brother Leo once saw a red ladder, on the summit of which was Jesus Christ, and a white one on top of which was his most holy mother. And he saw some who tried to ascend the red ladder, and they mounted a few steps and fell. They tried again and again, fell. They were then advised to go and try the white ladder, and by that one they easily ascended. For our Blessed Lady stretched out her hand and helped them, so they got safely to heaven.
The story which was made by the exuberant imagination sounded plausible. Although it was a man-made story, Pope Gregory XVI canonized Liguori as a saint, and Pope Pius IX declared him a doctor of the Catholic Church. Now Catholics are taught that it is better to pray to Mary, who is merciful and understands us.
We must never go to our Lord Jesus except through Mary, using her intercession and good standing with him. We must never be without her when praying to Jesus.
The plausible logic that Jesus cannot refuse Mary's request because she is his mother
This
is
Gwen,
shown
I don't
well
know
even
what's going
through
on,
the image
guys.
of Mary and baby Jesus. In most cases, Jesus is nested in Mary's arms as a baby. This downgrades Jesus to a little baby who is always dependent on Mary and lets people think that he can do nothing without Mary. They call Mary the Mother of God, which implies that she is above God. Mary as a female is merely a creation who was chosen to conceive Jesus. Mary worship of the Catholic Church reminds us of the mother-child worship of ancient Babylon. Just as Semiramis artfully spread the mother-child worship throughout Babylon when she ruled it over instead of her son Tammuz, the Catholic Church now makes people worship Mary, not God, by accepting the mother-child worship from Babylon.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is...
There is no trace of suffering or even joy in this Mary's face. But it is not the alabaster emptiness of her gaze these people see as they pray. It is the Mary whose pain at the loss of her son, Jesus Christ, resembles their own.
Mary's role for us as Christians is humanizing. It's somebody that we can relate to.
20% of all Roman Catholic places of worship in the United States, nearly 4,000, are named for Mary.
Shortly after the Council of Ephesus, which was in 431, when they declared her to be the Theotokos, the God-bearer, Mother of God. And then everything changes. And she starts to appear enthroned with a child on her lap, with angels and saints around her. That is when she becomes important.
By the Middle Ages and Renaissance, paintings of Mary could be read for symbols of her holiness.
Her outer mantle is blue, and underneath she usually, not always, has red robes.
She wears a dark blue coat, and she stands on the half moon. She is the mother of all gods.
So, the ancient religion of Babylon, they all have one thing in common: the sacred feminine. The sacred feminine.
Hang on, the screen's not right.
The sacred feminine. The
No, it's
sacred
them.
feminine.
Hang on, let me see if it's them or me. It's them. There you go. It's not my fault. It's the screen small.
Feminine. Ishtar the Babylonians, Tyre the Buddhism, Fatima of Muhammad, Sophia the Gnostics, Shekinah to the Kabbalist Jew, Mary to the Catholic, and Shakti to the Hindu. These all have one thing in common: the sacred feminine. And the sacred feminine is going to take you back to the source of light, because the light that resides
Is that this guy
in
he
that
had?
place that Plato talked about, you need a path to get back to that light. Listen, this is important. She is the one to take you to that light. Now, I'm going to give you a guess. Tell me this morning, who do you think that light is? You remember what this subject's all about? Lucifer. He's the light bearer.
There's a wind blowing through this church today, and that wind comes from Lucifer. Yes, it is. That has brought him into the house, and he's now in power.
They've taken that one down where the Pope's choir is singing about Lucifer being Christ's father. They've taken that down. I've tried to find it.
No doubt about it. Lucifer is the prince, and he has now a place within the central citadel of the church.
A lot of priests
Thanks, Hannah, the sub.
to perform themselves the satanic masses around Rome, and they perform them in the area where usually the Pope goes on holiday, near Castel Gandolfo, in the area where you have also Lake Nemi, in those forests around there. They perform these black masses, and there is a Catholic priest who acts as a satanic priest, because the moment in which they act as satanic priest is the moment in which they can really liberate themselves of all their perversions. They can do drugs, they can go with the women, with men, with everything, and they can do all kinds of things. So the sex cults are very powerful. Like, for example, CNN is showing that at the terminal station there is a lot of prostitution from minors, from young kids. Well, there was a scandal here in Italy at a certain point in 2013. I think it was June 2013. It went on the news for 2 days, then it was erased. They go into this My Bar and in these places around the Termini station to pick up these young kids. And then they used to have these ambulances, these fake ambulances parked in front of Termini station. And they used to pick up these young Romanian kids, 14-year-old kids, and bring them directly into the Vatican.
As an exorcist, when you do exorcisms, minor and major, the demons constantly taunt you with the condition of the church. They say, well, we're in St. Peter's. We can talk to whom we like. We have representatives sitting beside your Pope every day. What are you talking about? We are legit. I'm quoting the demons. This is what is said to you. How dare you? And our prince has been enthroned, installed. And you stay against us? What are you trying to persecute us for?
And so we have to understand that there is a Luciferian faction, a very strong Luciferian faction within the Holy See, not exclusive to the Holy See. This is a dark brotherhood that exists. These are the mystery adepts that have existed. They're following a lineage that goes back hundreds of years. Actually, that goes back to the Tower of Babel.
Once upon a time, a long time ago, there lived a man named Nimrod. Nimrod was the great-grandson of Noah. He was the most popular man on the earth at the time. Matter of fact, he was the king of the then-known world. He was responsible for building the cities of Babel and the Tower of Babel and the city of Nineveh, amongst others. Well, all that being aside, Nimrod, no doubt, had tremendous influence among the people that he was with. And what happened was he had this uncanny reputation of strength. He created great armies. And he was the ruler of the then-known world right after the flood. He was full of idolatry and covetousness, drunkenness, and rebelliousness towards God. And he had a phenomenal ability to deceive. In fact, I suppose he was much like, I guess, an early politician 4,000 years ago. But Nimrod married a woman named Semiramis. Now, Semiramis and Nimrod became basically king and queen of the then-known world. Well, at some point, Nimrod dies, and he became deified. He was the very first person that was ever deified on planet Earth, and they made him the sun god, which ended up being Baal. The word Baal in your scriptures can be traced back to Nimrod, so it's an interesting reality of history. When you see Baal and Ashtaroth, you're ending up coming all the way back to this story of Nimrod and Semiramis. And so Baal is now ruling the universe as the sun god, and somehow luck has it through the Babylonian legend that Semiramis gets pregnant by the rays of the sun of her deceased husband Nimrod, and she gives birth to a young baby boy named Tammuz.
Semiramis, Nimrod's wife, insisted that Nimrod became the sun god. She cut Nimrod's dead body into pieces and sent them to each tribe of Babylon. People regarded the place where a part of Nimrod was buried as sacred. She also claimed that Nimrod was reincarnated as her son. As Semiramis ruled over Babylon in place of her young son Tammuz, she maneuvered people into worshiping her. Monuments of Semiramis carrying her child Tammuz in her arms were set up all over Babylon, along with various images symbolizing the sun god. The sun worship and the mother-child worship, which was a scheme devised by Semiramis, put down roots as a religion of Babylon. Idolatry stemmed from Babylon, spread to many countries after the Tower of Babel collapsed. It is because when the Babylonians were scattered over the whole world, they brought the sun worship and the mother-child worship. The sun worship and the mother-child worship were assimilated into the cultures and religions of many countries, and they came to have various forms and names. Nimrod, the sun god, was known as Mithra in Persia, Sol in Rome, Ra or Horus in Egypt, and Apollo in Greece. Semiramis and Tammuz, who were the start of the mother-child worship, was called Isis and Horus, Venus and Dionysus, Diana and Attis, and Astaroth and Tammuz, respectively. Besides these, the image of goddess, who is holding a baby in her arms, was venerated in many countries of the world. If so, was the mother-child worship the creature of an age, which was especially welcomed only in Babylon? Surprisingly, the mother-child worship of Babylon has been passed down through the thousands of years and still exists today. In Vatican of Rome, we
隅田国際美術館では当館所蔵の9月36系神奈川沖並
we can find the mother-child worship in its original state.
Now, further down in the story, as Tammuz grows and becomes a man, Tammuz actually marries his mother, and they have a very sexual relationship. And that baby Tammuz and his mother Semiramis is where you get the story of Cupid. Cupid, during Valentine's Day, is how the story of Valentine's Day developed, was from Tammuz, who married a very unbiblical relationship with his mother. Okay, back to the story of Tammuz. So Tammuz, for 40 years, was a tremendous hunter, and he took the place of his father, ruling the world, and had tremendous power. But more than anything, he was a credible hunter. But unfortunately, his gift and his skill of hunting caught up with him one day, because he was killed during his 40th year by a wild boar. Every spring, the first Sunday after the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, they have what was called Ishtar's Sunday. And they would have a sunrise service. At the sunrise service, the priest of Ishtar would impregnate young virgins on the altar, and during that same service, they would take the babies that were now 3-month-old from the previous year, and they would sacrifice those children on the altar to Ishtar, and then they would take the eggs of Ishtar, and they would dip those eggs in the blood of those young infants. And that is where we get sunrise services, and that is potentially where we get the dyeing of Easter eggs. It is also interesting to note that worldwide universal color of Easter eggs is red. Even the White House, the official color of the White House Easter egg is ruby red. Now, back to Tammuz. Tammuz gets killed by a wild boar. So every year, in commemoration of celebrating the death and the deification of Tammuz, which became the son of God, the son of his father, they would set aside 40 days prior to Easter, and they would fast and they would pray, and they would have a giant feast on Easter Sunday where they would celebrate the death and the resurrection of Tammuz. And guess what they would have for dinner on that Sunday evening? You got it, Easter ham. They would kill a boar in commemoration to Tammuz, who was killed by a wild boar. And yes, the 40 days prior to Easter, what we call it Lent, or the Catholics call it Lent, that 40 days did not come from, my friends, the 40 days of Jesus in the wilderness. That 40 days was already in place for thousands of years before Jesus even showed up. It comes from the 40 days of fasting and praying for Tammuz before they celebrated Easter. I'm going to give you some of the names and what they're most commonly remembered for in these different cultures, and some of you will recognize them immediately. First of all, in Egypt, they were known as Isis and Osiris. In Phoenicia, they were recognized as Asheroth and Baal, the very same Asheroth and Baal that you see in the scriptures. In Greece, they were Aphrodite and Adonis, or Eros, where we get the word erotic from. And in Rome, they were called Venus and Cupid. That's right. That's where we get Valentine's Day from, and Cupid. Even in the Far East, listen to this. This is amazing. Cupid was known as Zoroaster. Zoroaster is made up of two words, Zoro, which means seed of, and Asheroth, which is Easter. And so what Cupid actually means in the Far East is the seed of Easter, or the seed of his mother, Tammuz, and his mother, Semiramis. If you look on your screen, you're going to see Isis and Osiris, or this is Ishtar and Tammuz. Now, some of you may be asking, well, wait a minute, I celebrate Easter. You're talking about Ishtar. Easter is actually the Anglicization of the word Ishtar. In other words, if you say Ishtar in English, it's pronounced Easter. That's how the etymology of that word evolved over time. What I want you to see is, I want you to see what's on her head is a crescent moon, and in the center of that crescent moon is the actual sun itself. And so the symbol of power of Isis or Ishtar was the crescent moon holding the sun itself, her deceased husband, Baal, the sun god. And you can see the baby there that is nursing from her breast. Ishtar was known as the goddess of the east, the bare-breasted fertility god of the east, or the sunrise, which is why they had the service at sunrise on Easter morning. Here on your screen, you see a pagan carving of the solar deity Baal Hadad depicted as a disc in a crescent. Okay, you can see the half-moon disc there in the center of your screen with the sun that is cradled inside of it. And that is the sun god, as well as the crescent moon that surrounds it. Now, as you see that the main symbol for the sun god was the crescent moon with the sun on the top of it, or centered and cradled inside that crescent moon, we now move to something that's a bit controversial but very true historically, is the Catholic Eucharist is actually the sun that is inside of that crescent moon. I'm going to show you some pictures of the actual Eucharist in different positions, and you're going to see that not only is it similar, it's identical. This is where they got the symbols from. You can see here, this is a particular object that holds the Eucharist, and I found this online, and this is what the quote said. I left off the particular church for obvious reasons, but this was their advertisement for a particular Friday. It says, Eucharistic adoration is held on the first Friday of every month for the purpose of honoring and praying to the Blessed Sacrament. Now, I don't know about you, but my Bible says to pray to the Father, our Father. Yeshua, Jesus, said to pray to the Father. He did not say to pray to inanimate objects, whether they represent him or not. Now, look very carefully at, on the right-hand side, you can see the moon, the crescent moon shaped, holding that sun or that wafer of bread. Here's a close-up of it right here. The crescent moon cradle with the sun-shaped monstrance of the Roman Catholic Church. And now you'll see that it's actually the rays of the sun go all the way around this. They didn't hide it at all. Why did they not hide it? Because this is thousands of years old. This comes right out of paganism and sun god worship, where it was the symbol of Baal and his wife Ishtar. And right here you can see the pine cone staff is another symbol found in paganism that's connected with the sun god coming out of Egypt, Osiris. It's kind of in the form of a pitchfork, you can see, where the pine cone is in the center. Now, why did they choose a pine cone? Because a pine cone represents...
Pine cone symbolism, another very popular piece of symbolism for people who consider themselves, quote, in the know, that they consider that they are spiritually aware and enlightened, they have the knowledge, they are awoken, they have wisdom, and they have transformed themselves spiritually. In many cases, it's the exact opposite. The pine cone symbolism comes after the pineal gland, which is at the center of the head. It's right here, circled in red. It's considered in the midbrain or the limbic system of the brain. It regulates, this gland regulates a lot of different functions within the individual related to perception, emotion, etc. And the gland looks like a little pine cone. It has a lot of blood flow that goes through it, and it's very much attacked as something that they seem not to want to develop or function properly. So a lot of the food, things in water are very much attacked to target this part of the central nervous system. The pine cone literally looks like a little pineal gland. Okay, the pineal gland looks like a little pine cone, I should say. This is called the Court of the Pine Cone, and it is at the Vatican. That's where that pine cone is at. It is surrounded by two peacocks. Peacocks are another big symbol in alchemy. They represent alchemical transformation. Again, the pine cone represents awakening, resurrection, or transmutation, spiritual transmutation. Now, below it, there is a black, empty sarcophagus right down there below on the left-hand side. As you go up these steps in the Court of the Pine Cone to the other side of it, from this image perspective, that's what you will see. And behind it, there is an empty sarcophagus. Now, they're basically throwing this symbolism right in your face. You know, we are the resurrected ones. We are the ones who have come out of darkness and into light. We have the knowledge. We understand how the awakening process works. We understand how this activity of the brain that people don't even understand and whose functions are essentially shut down due to the horrible nutrition and all kinds of pollutants in their food and water. We know how that works, you know, and we have done that transformation to ourselves, but that's not for you. You know, we're going to sequester that and keep it to ourselves and keep it here. And they never mention this. You'll never hear about this by the Vatican. But just go on Google Images, and, you know, you'll see tons of images of the type Court of the Pinecone. You have a lot of tourist images that just take pictures of it. Of course, here you see the Pope in his astrotheological regalia here.
The fish head miters that they wear are the representative of the fish head miters that were worn by the Sumerian priests and the priests of Babylon.
The Abgal.
Yes.
That's right.
yes.
They served in the temple of a goddess named Nenshi.
Yes, and it specifically references who we know as Dagon.
Yes.
And he was known as Oannes to the Greeks.
Yeah.
And this was, according to myth, an individual, a hybrid person, a half fish, half man thing that came out of the sea and began to instruct mankind in the lost knowledge.
So that base of it is the pine cone right there in his hand. I'll circle it right there. In symbolic iconography throughout the ancient world, the pine cone is revered. It's always a symbol of the transformation of a god. Often the god is giving that spiritual essence or knowledge to humanity. Here you see it in the Akkadian tradition of one of their gods, a clearly non-human looking entity. Here it is in the Babylonian tradition.
Because this staff goes all the way back to ancient sun god worship, where it represented power and authority of the gods, you see. And this is a close-up of that staff right here, where the pine cone is embedded right in the staff itself. Let's move on to another symbol. This is the symbol of the trident. The trident is the devil's pitchfork. It really is a symbol of Satan, of the horns of Satan. It's an ancient satanic and pagan hand gesture called the trident. We find this in archaeology all over the place. Whenever you get into any kind of society of sun god worship, you find the trident everywhere. You see it in ancient Babylon. It was placed in the hands of all the pagan sun gods. Now, all the pagan gods and pharaohs had some sort of trident, a staff, that they would be connected to power and authority of the gods. The most famous one, of course, is Neptune's trident. We call it the devil's pitchfork, and that's where it comes from. It's just not a drawing that someone made up. This has history built into it of where these things come from. Now, if you move forward in time, or during the same time period, excuse me, you're going to find another symbol that is even more important. As a matter of fact, you're going to see two symbols in this picture. This is a pagan statue of Jupiter that has been renamed St. Peter. You also see what is baby Jesus, supposed to be baby Jesus, is none other than baby Tammuz. And how do we know it's not Jesus? Because you see trident all over the place. You see the trident symbol in the hand of the infant Jesus, along with the tridents coming out of the statue's head. You'll see three tridents, two coming off the sides of the head and one coming off the top of the head. This is not baby Jesus, ladies and gentlemen. This is a pagan sun god, Tammuz, from the story of Baal, Nimrod, and Semiramis, ended up being Cupid in today's Valentine's Day. And right here is the ancient Babylonian altar for the sun god Baal, and its main symbol is the 8-pointed star, which can be depicted as two 4-point stars built inside of one another as the solar wheel. We see the same solar wheel sunburst over a Buddhist temple in Thailand. Here's a monastery, St. Ignatius, where the solar wheel or sunburst is depicted in the floor tiles. Wow. Here's the face of a child, which is, of course, Tammuz, within the fertility symbol of the sun's rays on a Roman Catholic altar. The same exact symbol is shown and a face of the Babylonian sun god on a pulpit in a Roman Catholic church in Scandinavia. Okay, all this same symbol comes right out of paganism, as I've shown. Okay, this is probably one of the most fascinating pictures that I have. I zoomed in to the Vatican using Google Earth and stopped several miles above, and look what we discovered. This is the largest solar wheel on Earth. Wow. This is the court of St. Peter at the Vatican in Rome itself. Excuse me, the sun disk behind the head of this Roman Catholic statue in Westminster Cathedral in London. Where did they get the idea of sun disks behind these saints? It's because this was what was found behind the head of Jupiter and all these sun gods was the actual monstrance of the Roman Catholic Church. That halo is not a halo, that is a sun disk, and they borrowed it from paganism. We see here behind Krishna another sun disk behind his head, and this is just to show that it doesn't just happen in Catholicism, that the sun disk predates Catholicism by hundreds, even thousands of years. It was borrowed. We see it in stained glass windows behind all of the Roman Catholic saints, even Mary. And if you look carefully, you see the Sacred Heart, that Sacred Heart. Even though I don't have time to go into this, even the Sacred Heart comes right out of paganism. That exact same symbol with the sun disk behind the Sacred Heart has to do with Baal and Tammuz, the sun gods. And you can see it all over the Roman Catholic Church and even in other pagan religions across the world. And where do we find this 8-pointed star, this solar wheel, this sun disk today? None other than on top of our Christmas trees. Now, I know all of us have been taught that the star on top of the Christmas tree represents the Star of Bethlehem, that the kings came in to find baby Jesus. But unfortunately, the star of the ancient pagan sun gods predates the star of the Christmas tree, the Star of Bethlehem, by over 1,000 years. They were taking the sunburst and connecting it to what you're going to learn in just a few minutes is the tree of Nimrod. And that is where we get our Christmas tree from and the star that we put on top. If you look carefully, you can see there is a tremendous significance and a similarity between the sunburst and the star that we put up there today. Here's the sun disk proudly displayed on top of Christmas trees in a mall. Matter of fact, this one doesn't even hide the fact that it's not a star. It's the sun that you're looking at. Even the 8-pointed star on top of the White House Christmas tree for everyone to see is the same 8-point star that we find in archaeology thousands of years ago connected to pagan sun god worship. When do you think the birthday of Nimrod and Tammuz was? On the first day of the year when the sun is reborn. And what day do you think that the sun is reborn? In the middle of winter, at this winter solstice, December 25th. That's right. That's where we get December 25th on Christmas Day, where we say that Jesus was born. Why did we choose Jesus being born on December 25th? Where did that date come from? Very simple. Jesus was the Son of God. Tammuz was the son of the gods. He was the son of his father, Baal. And so the pagans, which early Christianity came right out of paganism in Rome, they were already worshiping the sun god on Sunday in Rome, which is where we get worshiping on Sunday from.
All judges, city people, and craftsmen shall rest on the venerable day of the sun. Constantine's edict in 321 played an important role in making the sun god worship fade to put its roots down in the church.
Many Bible believers today have followed tradition handed down by previous generations. They believe and were taught that Sunday is the proper day of worship, that the Savior changed the day of worship from the Jewish Sabbath to Sunday. The adoption of Sunday as the Christian Sabbath has little to do with the Bible and everything to do with Constantine the Great over 300 years after the Messiah's death. Constantine was emperor of the Roman Empire from 306 to 337 CE. He was a sun worshipper who on his deathbed converted to Christianity. In 321 CE, while still a sun worshipper, Constantine established Sunday as the day of worship. He decreed,
"On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in cities rest, and let all workshops be closed."
In this coin circulated by Constantine in 317 CE, we see the face of Constantine on one side, and on the other the figure of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. The sun god was also known as Mithras, and his birth was on December 25th. This date was adopted as the birth of Christ and became the date for Christmas many centuries later. Clearly, Constantine was an avid worshipper of the sun god Sol Invictus. Amazingly, Martin Luther, the champion of the modern-day Protestant movement, said,
"They allege that the Sabbath changed into Sunday, the Lord's Day, contrary to the Decalogue as it appears. Neither is there any example more boasted of than the changing of the Sabbath day. Great, say they, is the power and authority of the Church, since it dispensed with one of the 10 Commandments."
Nowhere in the Bible do we see that Yahshua and his apostles changed the day of worship from Saturday to Sunday. In fact, the Messiah, in his Sermon on the Mount, has this end-time prophecy: "Pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day."
Those who were tainted with polytheism of Rome, it looked as if they had converted, but in actuality it wasn't easy for them to get rid of the religious rites and institutions of worshiping the sun, the moon, and the star.
What's happening to the volume? That's not me, that's them. I think. Let me check. Yeah, that's not me, it's them. Where was it there?
Easy for them to get rid of the religious rites and institutions of worshiping the sun, the moon, and the star.
No, that's them, guys. Okay, I'm going to call it a night, guys. God bless. Thanks for joining. Love you guys.